Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku was kidnapped by AFO part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story unknown_voice from L3. So let's start the video. Toshinori woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding frantically against his chest. He tried to suck in a deep breath, only to forget how to breathe temporarily. His hands reached up to pull through his hair, trying to get his mind to remember that he needed air. When his brain could convince his lungs to help him breathe, he let out a pathetic groan. It was only 2 o'clock in the morning. He gazes at his wife, who is sleeping with their son's favorite all-might teddy bear. He felt a stabbing pain pierce his heart when he saw his wife curled up in a ball, holding their son's favorite toy as if it were a lifeline. Dried tear tracks on her cheeks were visible underneath the moon's light, showing how heartbroken 𝐀𝐦 was over the situation. "We will find them, Toshinori. We have the best of the best working on this case." The nightmare Toshinori had woken up from was a cruel, recurring nightmare. It has been occurring for the past few months since they received devastating news about their son. He dreams of his green-haired child, Izuku, being taken away by a shadowed figure. If his mind was especially cruel, the one stealing his child would be all for one. If his nightmares decide that it is all for one will be the one stealing his child, and the villain will taunt him. The villain would flash a wide grin stretching across his face as Izuku slept peacefully. If it were a shadow figure, it would grin as it bares its fangs. He would reach an arm toward Izuku, desperately trying to reach for his son. When his hand was inches away from his son, the one snatching his child would conveniently put some distance between them. He would muster up the stamina to sprint miles ahead, leaving a trail of dust clouds. The vicious cycle would continue several times until his son wakes and begins wailing. When, not if Izuku starts crying, that's when the nightmare becomes his personal version of hell. They would run to a graveyard, whether it was an unknown figure or all for one. At this point, Toshinori would push beyond his limitations to gain some distance. He would try to catch up, but he would only get further behind. He calls for his son to say that everything will be fine and that his father will save him. Then, he would find himself standing in front of an unmarked grave without explanation. He would look around, wondering why he was standing in front of an unmarked grave. Looking down at his feet, he sees his son's pale and still face. Izuku has been missing for 3 months after his 3rd birthday. On the 1st anniversary of their son's disappearance, a grotesque package was sent to the Tsukachi that will shatter the family life forever. The first item Tsukachi found was a crystal-clear photo that showed the child's face. The chubby cheeks, freckles, and wild green hair were the exact features of the couple's missing son. The detective has a sinking feeling about what he will find in the package, but he must continue. If they were to get answers for Izuku's disappearances, Tsukachi needs to go through the package. It's not for him, but for his friends. The second item he found was a Ziploc bag containing hair clippings, specifically green hair. Tsukachi fears for the child's safety, praying that this won't turn out like most similar cases he had previously dealt with. The only reason someone would send hair clippings was to prove they had the person in question in their grasp. It's to point to the other person and grab their attention. The third item caused Tsukachi to bend over and throw up on the floor. He held a vivid picture of a mutilated corpse with Izuku's face in his hands. The eyes of the corpse were dull and lifeless, void of any light that life provides. Dried tears could be seen in the photo, indicating that the child's last moments were painful. The last item was a letter addressed to the couple, mocking how much of a failure the couple was as parents. Most of the letter is dedicated to mocking Toshinori's failure as a hero. "Can you call yourselves parents? It was ridiculously easy to steal Izuku away. I was disappointed by the daycare's lack of security. Honestly, you should have chosen a daycare with better security and trained personnel. Not one worker stopped me when I held Izuku in my arms despite how much the child wanted to get away from me. All I had to do was provide a generous cash gift and a fictitious story about being the child's uncle. It was effortless to walk away from the daycare from the child. I expected more from you, considering that one is a hero and the other is a lawyer. I wonder if it would be more of a challenge if I abduct Izuku's half-brother. Teenagers are always difficult to deal with, especially the ones in heroics. If I grow bored again, I may try to kidnap your son if he has not graduated by then. Yagi, if you're reading this letter, you should listen to my advice and retire from being a hero. Your inability to find and save your son indicates your abilities. Can you call yourself a hero if you can't protect your flesh and blood? If a hero can't protect their child, what qualifies them to save everyone else with a stupid smile? How many more children are going to die due to your incompetence? What will your failures cost you in the future? Another child's life. The life of an entire family. Casualties that reach up to the thousands. Who knows? Izuku was an intelligent toddler who could have amounted to something great. It was such a waste that I had to dispose of him when I got bored of your lack of progress. Many years later, a green-haired child stares at the gates of UA, ready to become the hero who once and for all takes down the one who robbed him of everything. His childhood, innocence, and the truth of his origins. Izuku listens to the playful argument between Hitoshi and Katsuki, thoughts gradually drifting away. A vision of a woman he can't quite make out places several colorful toys on a blanket, not hearing the name she is calling out. Then another person he can't make out, a man this time, would not so subtly push a teddy bear to the middle of the blanket. Chubby arms would reach for the teddy bear, making dramatic grabby motions at the teddy bear. The woman's arm would reach the teddy bear and gently push the toy to the tiny hands. Immediately, tiny hands would snatch the toy as joyful laughter was heard. It's rare for a young child to remember events before school age. That fact made Izuku question the authenticity of the vision playing out in his mind. Was it an accurate memory of his past when he was young? Or was it an imagination his brain devised to help him cope with his situation? Did he come from a loving family? Or was all for one actual truth about his birth parents abandoning him to the serpent's clutches? If it's the former, it means all for one stole another thing that Izuku cannot get back, which is his opportunity to grow up with a loving family. If it was the latter, then life loves to torture him. Still thinking about the what-ifs, Hitoshi asks, interrupting Izuku's train of thought. I think it was a memory, Izuku answers, sounding unsure. It felt so real to me, but it could have been a fantasy my brain created. Not too far from where he was lying on the floor, he heard Katsuki say a string of curses and insults at the one responsible for screwing with his dumbass friend mind. Katsuki's way of comforting someone was crude and loud, but Izuku appreciated the effort nonetheless. Besides, it is entertaining when someone calls out for Katsuki's language or method of comforting a person. Mostly, it's Hitoshi giving Katsuki a deadpan look. I'm going to fuck him up when I see him, Katsuki grinned, sparks emitting from his palms. We'll get payback for the shit he put you through. We're not ready for that, Izuku comments, earning the attention of his two friends. He is basically the king of the underworld. You know, the top villain mastermind with a lot of manpower, money, influence, and resources to swat us like flies. You have been training us, Hitoshi points out as he gets a look from Izuku. That's not enough, Izuku counters, making a shushing motion when he senses that Katsuki is about to say something. We need information on where he's hiding now, feedback from professional heroes, access to resources, and a license. Then why are we vigilantes? Katsuki questions. To collect information, Izuku reminds the two. Ironically, vigilantism was how he met the two. Hitoshi chased a cat from one direction, and Katsuki came from the opposite direction. Katsuki initially followed him because of a trail of blood Izuku had left behind based on the story Katsuki told him. Somehow, the two of them found him weakly leaning against the dumpster. He doesn't recall much afterward due to falling unconscious. The next thing he knows, Izuku wakes up on a couch with bandages wrapped around his stomach and people demonstrating acts of kindness he's not accustomed to. But we can take the fucker out, Katsuki insists, causing Izuku to shake his head. Oh, come on, are you calling us weak? I have seen what he can do, Izuku cautioned, swallowing down the lump in his throat. He may be mortally injured from his battle with All Might, but he is far from weak. His body shakes as a phantom sensation of all for one's inflicting pain with one of his many quirks. He could still feel the white-hot pain that rushed through his body due to being punished for not doing a job correctly. Even with a messed-up face and being on some type of life support system, he was still strong enough to remind him of his place. In fact, Izuku would argue that the machinery he was attached to made the villain more intimidating. I can end your life at any time. The villain's words return to him abruptly, and Izuku can feel the lingering sensation of a large hand almost squeezing the top of his skull. The day I grow bored of you, or you outgrow your usefulness, whichever comes first, is the day you die. Feeling that his fears were getting the best of him, Izuku slowed his breathing. he felt someone grabbing his hand, giving him instructions on how he could ground himself back to reality. After minutes of silence, gentle instructions, and steady breathing, Izuku could almost revert to his usual self. "Hitoshi's mom is right," Katsuki notes in a quieter tone than usual. "You do need to see a shrink." "Too bad they are mandated reporters," Izuku spoke a little bit too happily. "Which means I have an excuse not to go. We are dragging you to a therapist after we deal with the world's most dangerous villain," Hitoshi states. "And if we can't, we'll let our moms drag you to someone." Izuku feigns a gasp of shock, placing a hand over his heart. Then, he realized that he had always wanted to ask Hitoshi about a certain topic for a while. "How the fuck did your mom get fake documentation?" Izuku asks, facing Hitoshi. "She gave me the name Akatani Mikumo, a fake backstory, and lie with a straight face to the courts." "Money talks," Hitoshi shrugs. "And all you had to do was let yourself be adopted by her or the Pomeranian's mom." The inclusive blood results made it easier to spin the lie in their favor, allowing him to be easily adopted. If the government could save money by pawning a child to another person, they won't investigate the child's circumstances too much. Case in point, Izuku was adopted in a few months without difficulty. "I still can't believe that the decision to stay with a family of insomniacs or angry Pomeranians was decided in the game of rock, paper, scissors," Izuku recalls, shaking his head at the absurdity of it. "To think that was how I ended up staying with Hitoshi instead of Katsuki." If the off chance that he was abandoned or rejected by his birth parents, Izuku can confidently say that he has at least the love of two families who accepted him without question. He doesn't deserve it or dares to dream such a thing. But for once, he was allowed to have something nice for himself. Exhausted, drained, and in pain, Izuku collapsed onto the floor. He tasted copper on his tongue, and his vision was going blurry. He doesn't want to risk falling unconscious due to his fears of being punished severely. He tried to continue pushing himself to the limit, but his muscle was burning in pain, and his mind was screaming to stop. When he tried to use his quirk one more time, his throat was met with hot, searing pain. In his mind, he was silently pleading that he would be spared from any punishment. His pathetic state has to prove to Master that Izuku did everything he could to heal many of the villain's injuries. It's impossible to completely heal Master's injuries after his all-out brawl with All Might. The hero gave the villain injuries that would have killed a regular person. Honestly, Izuku did everything he could at the cost of his voice. He'll be lucky to speak a complete sentence in a few days. He doesn't know for sure, but Izuku will have to accept that he'll be completely voiceless for a while. He can't continue using his quirk, the doctor warns. He had lost a significant amount of body weight. If he were to continue, he would die. Izuku hasn't even noticed how many pounds he lost from using his quirk. His muscle loss could explain why he's little strength to get up from the floor. He must have sung to the point that his body was burning his fat reserve. And when that wasn't enough, his body began metabolizing his muscle. That's not good. He had proven his use, all for one acknowledges in amusement. "I knew the benefits of keeping his child alive would have its rewards." Based on the villain's comment, Izuku can safely assume he gets to live another day. The fact that All for One was amused, despite his injuries, means that there won't be any punishment. For a little while, he doesn't have to worry about anything. No jobs because of the amount of body mass he lost. No force quirk usage because he temporarily lost the ability to use voice. No feelings of guilt or shame because he won't be forced to stain his hands in blood for some time. "Make sure he is fed a calorie-dense meal," the villain ordered the doctor, picking Izuku by the collar of the boy's shirt. "I don't care how, but I need this boy to regain the body mass he lost as quickly as possible." Izuku no longer had it in him to keep his eyes open. As he fell unconscious, the last thing he saw was the floor below him. Tilda opening the steel door where he perceives the children to be. Izuku felt overwhelming rage bubble inside him when he saw the horrendous state of the children. Hiding in the dark corner of the room was a group of children curled up and clinging to one another. They were so thin that they looked breakable. He feared that if he were to lay a finger on those children, they would shatter. The hospital gowns they wore made them look like sticks wearing a dress. What caught his attention the most were the stains on the hospital gowns. Every single hospital gown was dirty and covered in bright red splotches. On almost all of them, there were fresh bandages wrapped somewhere in their bodies, like their waists, arms, legs, hands, or head. Squinting his eyes, Izuku saw that most children had fresh scratches and bite marks on the parts of their bodies not covered by bandages. Izuku's mouth opens before he can stop it, his voice dripping with anger. What did those monsters do to all of you? A brave little boy with bright yellow eyes hesitantly approaches him. To appear less intimidating, Izuku crouched down to be at eye level with the boy. For whatever reason, that causes the boy to warm up to him and give the vigilante a small smile. You look like a green rabbit, the boy quietly said, looking at Izuku and then to the floor. Your voice is weird, but you're much nicer than those mean people. Fair assumption. His dark green hoodie had bunny ears, and his sweatpants were the same color. The exceptions to his green color scheme were his black combat boots and the bunny whisker face mask he wore. The voice changer was gray, but who would see the voice changer inside his mask? And you'll never have to see those mean people, Izuku reassured, his tone gentle and warm. My friends and I are going to ensure you're all right. It's difficult, but he needs to control his rage. These children need him. He has the urge to help, save, and heal them. While no one had saved and healed him, that doesn't mean these children had to have the same story. Feeling the urge to lessen the children's suffering, Izuku's hand reached to his mask and was seconds away from pulling down his face mask. But he was stopped when someone placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Don't you fucking do it, Katsuki warned, hiding his worry. You can't risk it. If you use your quirk, the bastard will find out pretty quickly. But Izuku wants to help these children. The rational part of his brain agrees with Katsuki's warnings. It had been about 2 years since he escaped and used the quirk he was born with. Not once did he use his singing quirk. However, today may be the day when his emotions override the logical part of his brain. Please, Izuku quietly said, turning his head over his shoulder. He stares at Katsuki, adopting a pleading voice. Let me heal them. I can prevent most of the scaring if I heal them now. He knows that he sounds desperate, but he can't stop the images of the scars that cover his body from flashing through his mind. If he can prevent them from becoming like him, Izuku will do anything. I know I'm going to regret this, Katsuki groaned, shaking his head. Be fucking quick about it. Izuku stood up and turned his back on the children. When he's positive that the children can't see his face, he pulls down his face masks and begins singing a song he made up on the spot. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the bravest of them all? Is it the children trapped within caged walls? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who will break the prison's walls? Is it the jade rabbit who heard their calls? Mirror, mirror on the wall, what lies beyond the bleak halls? Is it their past freedom they once recall? Mirror, mirror on the wall, is it time to save them all? Here comes the jade rabbit to Gid. A palm smacks Izuku across the face, abruptly ending Izuku's song. Izuku looked at Katsuki with an offensive look. The blonde didn't care and forcibly put Izuku's back on. Once the mask was back on, he noticed Hitoshi standing at the entrance. We need to get out, Hitoshi warned, looking over his shoulders. I spotted a few heroes, and they noticed the unconscious traffickers. A tiny hand grasped his pants leg and tugged. Izuku looks down to see the bright yellow eye boy with a sad expression. Although the boy didn't verbalize it, he could see in the boy's eyes that the kid didn't want him to leave. Izuku didn't know what he did to elicit such a reaction. All he did was healed the boy and his companions from injuries. The heroes are the good guys, Katsuki explains, impatiently tapping his foot. We know you love the rabbit, but the rabbit needs to go. But why? A little girl from afar asked. We love Rabbit and his friends. The heroes like to argue with us, Hitoshi explains, on guard. We are both good, but they don't like each other ideas. I have to go, Izuku gently states, giving a comforting pat on the boy's head. But I got something to give you. Izuku gave a slight chuckle when he heard Katsuki and Hitoshi groan as he pulled out some custom postcards. On one side was a drawing of Katsuki, Hitoshi, and Izuku in their vigilante costumes. Katsuki had almost the exact same outfit, but it was entirely black, and the hood had dog ears that looked like horns. The mask the blonde wore had wolf teeth instead of whiskers. Hitoshi's outfit was dark violet with a hood with cat ears. Expectedly, Hitoshi's face mask has cat whiskers. If one were to flip the other side of the postcards, that person could see a motivational message about moving forward and destroying any obstacles that may stand in their way. Of course, his and his friend's signature was printed on the postcards. Funnily enough, it wasn't their real handwriting. Here, Izuku said, giving the boy a dozen postcards. Keep it, and I'll always be there with you. He's going to pretend that he didn't hear the other two mutter about his actions. Katsuki may act tough, and Hitoshi may act dismissive. but he knows they both agreed. Also, he had seen the two of them do it too when children grew attached to them and didn't want them to go. The boy gradually smiled as he looked at each of the three vigilantes in amazement. The child then ran toward the group. He turned back to face the trio alongside every other child and happily waved goodbye. It was the first time Izuku saw each of the faces with a bright smile and eyes filled with hope. Sakachi slides the postcard and the interview transcripts toward 𝐲𝐸's direction. 𝐲𝐸 reached the postcard, not expecting the childish drawing on one side. It was an extra postcard that the children didn't want to waste. He had thought the rumors of a group of vigilantes giving postcards were false, but today proved that the rumor was true. He would like to know the reasoning behind providing postcards, considering that the items could be used as clues to their identity. 𝐲𝐸 recognizes the vigilantes on the postcard. Hearing some members of the police force discussing the trio's ability to evade all capture attempts. The trio continued to cause trouble and additional headaches for the police force. Still, most can begrudgingly agree that they were competent. If only they were doing legal hero work. They would be a hell of a hero and create a lot fewer gray hairs. They were telling the truth, Sakachi disclosed, taking a swig from his coffee. Their stories about 𝗵𝗃𝗺 using a singing quirk to heal their injuries were true. 𝐲𝐸 felt a headache coming and chugged the rest of his coffee. Out of the three, 𝗵𝗃𝗺 is the most complicated and problematic. He reached for the transcripts and quickly scanned through the materials. The more he read, the more it became evident that 𝗵𝗃𝗺's healing quirk was powerful. Every child has their wounds, cuts, and sickness healed instantly due to 𝗵𝗃𝗺's song. 𝐲𝐸 tensed when he noticed a child's comment about Cerberus's warnings. The implications were not hard to miss. 𝗵𝗃𝗺 was hiding from someone due to his healing quirk. The question is who 𝗵𝗃𝗺 was running away from, and why did 𝗵𝗃𝗺 decide to use his quirk for this situation? How many people know about 𝗵𝗃𝗺's quirk? 𝐲𝐸 asks. A part of him worries for the group. A powerful healing quirk can turn the tides in the hero's or villain's favor. If news about a vigilante with a healing quirk spreads, countless groups will attempt to recruit 𝗵𝗃𝗺. Villains may use Cerberus and 𝐶𝐻 as hostages, forcing 𝗵𝗃𝗺 to participate. Unsavory heroes may coerce the vigilante to become their sidekick. Not a lot at the moment, Sakachi responds with a tired expression. However, it's best to capture the trio before more discovers 𝗵𝗃𝗺's quirk. 𝐲𝐸 had never met the trio in person, but heard others sharing their interactions with the group. Tonight was the first time he had been close to meeting the vigilantes. Despite never meeting them, he feels the need to be involved. The reports he had been reading could indicate that the group was young teenagers, so he may be projecting his concerns about his students onto the trio. Looking back at the postcard, 𝐲𝐸 recollects one of his last interactions with his father. 𝐲𝐸, his dad started. Do you know why most underground heroes die comparably younger than the other heroes? Because we deal with the underworld, 𝐲𝐸 answers, unamused by his dad's question. He notes how a frown formed on his dad's face as he became lost in thought. It took moments for him to realize that he was speaking to someone. That only plays a small part, his dad explains, shaking himself back to reality. Most of my colleagues died for a child, believing that child is worth their life. A child, 𝐲𝐸 repeated. Seeing children in horrid states was expected in their line of work. It's not rare to find children who were hurt for the benefit of others. Underground heroes may die from the people responsible for hurting the children, but that's much of a role children has to underground heroes' deaths. They logically know it's wrong to abort their task due to an emotional response, his dad continues. However, they want to save the child. Even if saving the child costs them their life, they choose to follow through with their emotional response. You may one day meet a child or two you want to protect for a reason you cannot explain. The challenge is how you'll protect them without losing your life. 𝐲𝐸 sighs, looking at the postcard in his hands. Is this what you were referring to when you said, a child worth one's life? Sakachi gave 𝐲𝐸 a confused look, not understanding what's going through the underground hero's mind. Izuku's mouth watered when a few large scoopfuls of eggs were piled onto his plate. He began drooling when a generous amount of bacon was piled next to eggs. Getting impatient and hungry, he quickly grabbed his fork and shoved food into his mouth. Careful, a feminine voice commented. We don't want you to get sick. With cheeks full of food, Izuku looked in the direction of the voice. His eyes were on a middle-aged woman with luxurious indigo hair and eyes that shone like sapphire. The woman, Hikari, gave an amused chuckle. Remember what we said, the woman gently reminded Izuku. There will always be plenty of food for you to eat. Izuku totally did not flush in embarrassment. He totally remembers the speech the Hitoshis gave him about how there will always be food in the house, and that he was allowed to help himself to more without permission. That speech definitely did not slip out of his mind. And we can always go out to get more of those jelly pouches you love so much, a middle-aged man with blonde hair points out. Just tell us when you need some more. Preferably before I leave work. Izuku turned his head to face the man, Takashi, and nodded. The man had messy blonde hair that resembled Hitoshi's hairstyle and purple eyes. The man was also ridiculously tall and well-built, giving off an intimidating aura despite being a goof. He would be lying if he said he hadn't been terrified of the man for the longest time. Thanks, Izuku smiled. Can you buy all the berry flavors jelly pouches again? Absolutely, Takashi confirms. There's something just right about buying all the stock of a particular product. Try to leave some for the other customers, Hitoshi calls out from the living room. You don't know who you'll be pissing off. Without any shame or hesitation, Takashi responds. No, if you, Izuku, and Katsuki want to play vigilante, you will need snacks to fuel you guys up. Izuku smiled, enjoying the playful banter between the father and son. Takashi and Hitoshi's personalities were nothing alike. But that was the entertaining part of their father and son relationship. Seeing scenes like this makes him more determined to defeat the supervillain lurking underneath everyone's noses. He's not going to let All for One remove the light out of this family's eyes, as he did with the first two people who demonstrated an ounce of kindness and provided him the freedom he could only dream of. No, he will not let history repeat itself. Izuku's eyes widen in amazement and curiosity at the garden's different tulip colors. When Hikari said she'd be taking him to a botanical garden, he didn't expect it to be filled with varying collections of gardens, woodlands, and man-made meadows. Unconsciously, his hand reached for one of the red tulips. You can appreciate nature's beauty, Hikari spoke, gently guiding Izuku's hand away from the tulip. However, we need to respect the plants on display here. Sorry, Izuku replies, cheeks burning red in embarrassment. It's just that I rarely see something beautiful in the past, especially something so red. Izuku felt an arm wrapped around his shoulder, giving him a comforting squeeze. He turned slightly to face Hikari, seeing sad eyes staring back at him. She gives him a warm smile despite the sadness she must have felt for his past experiences. Some of him feels guilty for making someone like her so sad after everything her family and the Bakugo family did for him. Another part of him feels happy that such empathic and kind-hearted people love him despite his history. One day, you'll be free, Hikari said, as if it was the truth. She seems so sure of herself. In the meantime, we'll all do our best to help you forgive yourself and support you in ending the legacy of evil. There may never be a day when he fully forgives himself. It was his healing quirk that kept the symbol of evil alive. His hands had slain the heroes, government workers, and everyone who posed a threat to All for One. Sure, it was because he was ordered, but he chose to follow the orders issued to him in the end. Still, despite knowing all of this, the Shinsu and Bakugo family are adamant about helping him forgive himself and take care of him unconditionally. Not once did they judge him for tidbits he willingly shared with them. Instead, they all seemed more determined to help his goals to become a hero and stop All for One. Your family and the Bakugos are crazy, Izuku states, shaking his head. However, based on your husband's, Mitsuki's, and Masaru's past, I should have suspected you would all get invested. Izuku felt Hikari loosen her grip before removing her arm from his shoulders. A grin appeared on her face, indicating that Izuku was right in his assessment. Go figures. Of course, the people who were orphans and former vigilantes would take him in, probably saw some messed up stuff themselves, and saw a bit of themselves in him. Makes sense. And that craziness made us filthy rich, Hikari joked, grabbing Izuku's hand. At least, my husband and I. Mitsuki and Masaru are rich too, but not like filthy rich. Before Izuku could respond, he was dragged by the woman across the sidewalk. He heard her muttering that she needed to meet the owners and would be at risk of running late. Accepting his situation, he allowed her to drag him toward a giant building that looked like a conservatory. They were drawing attention from passerbyers, who were all looking at them oddly. Some whispered why he wasn't at school, which Izuku pretended to not hear. At first, it was something he could have handled. He could have ignored the small talk of others, if that was all they were talking about. However, they started to make comments about his scars. They made theories that Hikari was the one who inflicted those scars on him. It was those types of comments that pissed him off. Izuku opens his mouth, preparing to tell them to mind their business, as he plans to chase them away. Sensing Izuku's intention, Hikari walked faster and pulled Izuku away from the people who made her pseudo-son upset. Unknown to the teen, Hikari did it so the teen didn't draw unnecessary attention. "We need to take you out more," Hikari whispered to herself, happily ignoring the people looking at her and Izuku. "You'll need to learn how to deal with noisy people and those with shitty personalities." Izuku, who didn't hear what Hikari was telling herself, continued to snap his head toward those making comments he didn't like. The woman harshly tugged him if he took one step away from Hikari and headed toward the people saying crap he didn't like. Reluctantly, he stopped trying and let himself be dragged to Hikari's boring meeting. Apparently, it wasn't teenage vigilantism she drew the line. It was chasing nosy people in broad daylight where the mother drew the line. "Don't wander too far. My talks with the owners should take an hour tops." Well, Izuku wandered too far, and he's lost. He strolled around the conservatory, took too many turns, and walked out of the wrong door to find himself at an indoor performance in one of the Woodlands rooms. He stared at the group of children who had their back turns, then at the teachers dressed to the nines, and lastly at the person on the stage. The person performing appeared to be a children's songwriter. If he had doubts, the large banner with "Children's Songwriter" in bolded letters should be enough evidence to erase all doubt. Taking a step back, he was about to leave when he got a sinking feeling in his gut. Trusting his gut instinct, he scanned his surroundings for anything suspicious. Something is about to go wrong, and there's a group of people unaware of the danger that is about to occur. He looked to the corners of the room and saw nothing. Turning his head toward the songwriter, he saw the songwriter holding something in her hand. At the same time, the songwriter made eye contact with him. Her eyes widened in realization as Izuku began to sprint toward the songwriter. The songwriter must have known she was caught because she threw the item at the floor, creating a loud bang. Immediately after the item made contact with the surface, smoke began to fill the room. Everything became obscured as a thick black cloud blanketed everything. A mix of children's screams and the teacher's shouts echoed around the rooms as everyone frantically ran around. Activating one of his quirks, lens, Izuku could see through the smoke surrounding him. What he saw was several tentacles sprouting out of the songwriter's back. In two of the tentacles, there was a child tightly wrapped in the tentacles. The blonde girl and boy with blue eyes tried to scream, but all that came out was desperate gasps for air. The songwriter nodded in satisfaction before making a run for it. Not wanting to give anything away, Izuku dashed through the crowd of children and teachers. He dodges from failing arms and running bodies that nearly crash into him. When the children's cries got increasingly louder, he flinched and muttered silent apologies for not giving them a warning or comforting them. A part of him feels guilty for not consoling these children in the same way he comforted the children a few nights ago. However, he needs to prioritize the children taken away by the songwriter. Taking the same way out as the songwriter, Izuku found himself outside the conservatory, following a long trail that leads to one of the fountain gardens. Unknown to him, the songwriter was waiting for him with extra help. She stood calmly as a sinister grin spread across her face. The kids that were trapped in the tentacles were unconscious, making Izuku furious. Out of anger, he charged toward her until he felt a dull pain on his right cheek. Stopping in his tracks, he places one hand on his right cheek. When he felt warm liquid on his cheek, he realized someone must have thrown a knife at him. Blinded by his emotions, he neglected to focus on his surroundings and remained on guard. Looking behind him, he sees two cloaked figures standing on top of one of the fountains, drawing more knives out of their pockets. "It's the bounty kid," the songwriter notes, pointing at him with her pointer finger. "We will surely gain his favor if we bring the kid to him alongside the kids he wanted us to abduct." He feels the blood drain from his face as the implications of the songwriter's words sink in. Now, he has to save them. He would rather die than let anyone experience the same type of abuse, as his friend's parents like to call it. "Over my dead body," Izuku growled, subtly pulling a knife hidden in his pocket. Izuku fails to realize the crowd forming from a safe distance, or the people filming the fight about to go down. Sidestepping quickly, Izuku dodged the knife that was aimed for his calves. Sensing someone approaching behind him, he spun around and aimed a powerful kick at one of the clock figure's stomachs. The clock figure stumbles in pain, distracted by the unsuspected attack. That moment of distraction gave Izuku enough time to muster up the strength to lift the figure with his two arms before chucking the individual into a water fountain. For good measure, He dashed toward the fountain to make sure the individual was unconscious. He heard a pained groan, indicating that the person was indeed conscious. Not wanting to deal with this specific clock figure, his hand reached toward a large vase filled with pot soil and flowers that appeared to be rare. Then, he smashed the vase on the person's head, knocking them out cold. The sounds of footsteps could be heard, making Izuku turn around. The second individual was fastly approaching him, most likely due to a speed-related quirk. Not wanting his face to be at the other end of a fist, he blocks the upcoming punch with his forearms. The second he felt the fist making contact, he kneed them in the gut and shoved them off. Using the opportunity, he tried to do a side sweep, but the other person dodged at just the right moment. "What are you doing there standing?" the second individual shouts, pulling more knives out of his pockets. If we want to gain his favor, he needs to apprehend Jester and bring him. "I was told not to damage the goods," the songwriter interrupts, amused by the scene before her. "If you can't handle fighting a teen, why did he hire you?" His eyes showed fear, and the two remaining villains knew it. He heard cruel laughter from the songwriter and a dark chuckle from the cloaked figure. They fucking knew who he was and who he was forced to serve. If there wasn't talk about gaining favor that gave it away, it was Jester. It wasn't just the name that bothered him. No, it was the person he was forced to become under that name. Knives began to soar through the air, aimed at the non-vital parts of his body. Izuku quickly jumped out of the way, narrowly avoiding being hit. He looked at the individual, gave the person the finger, and silently hoped that the individual could be easily provoked like Katsuki. Lucky for him, this individual was easily provoked and began to run at full speed toward him. The person was so lost in their anger that they didn't realize that they were about to have a knife plunged at them. When the person got close enough, he tossed another expensive-looking vase with a likely rare flower in the direction. The cloak individual slammed a fist at the item, shattering the vase and letting the dirt spill all over the ground. Taking advantage of their distracted state, Izuku shoots toward the person, and he has the blade lodged in the figure's arms. "You fucking brat," the person hissed, creating some distance between them. "You have to make everything difficult. Why can't you stay still?" Yes, he does. They forgot that one should never put their enemy in a corner. That's what they were doing, putting him in a corner. Even the most cowardly people in the world will fight to the end if they don't have the choice. He doesn't want to lose that taste of freedom he come to enjoy and treasure. He'll have nothing if they drag him back to All for One. The two unconscious blonde kids will meet the darker side of humanity and be robbed of their childhood. He doesn't want that for them. He'll fight for their and his freedom to the very last breath, even if most would have chosen to run away out of self-preservation. "It wasn't my business originally," Izuku frowned, darting forward. He was closing the distance between them, and his opponent knew it. He moved aside when his opponent attempted to hit him with more knives with his other hand. That was the wrong thing to do on their part since he was able to catch the handle of one of the knives. "But a hero helps those in need," Izuku loudly declared. His face morphs into one of anger. The situation finally got to him as his initial fears were replaced with rage. So my legs began to move on their own. What type of hero, much less a person, let people get abducted, hurt, killed? He aimed the knife at the person's calves, waiting in anticipation as the blade flew through the air. Seconds later, the knife hits the figure's calf. The person collapses on the ground, hissing in pain. Quickly, Izuku grabbed another vase display and smashed it on the figure's head. Expectedly, the figure was knocked unconscious. "Whatever you're planning to do to the kids may not be business," Izuku said aloud, turning to face the songwriter. "But a hero helps, even if it's not their business, or if their help is unwanted. They take a stand and protect others and those in need. Even at the expense of one's life," the songwriter taunts, dropping the children onto the ground. "That's rich. Where are the heroes you are speaking so highly of? Why is there not a single hero fighting in your place?" "Because I'm here," Izuku shouts, darting toward the woman. He narrowly dodges the tentacles that tried to slam him onto the ground. At first, he was unsure how he's going to deal with her, since the songwriter could use the tentacles as a protective shield. Then, he realized all the knives scattered. That's it. He'll use the knives to his advantage. Running across the area, Izuku hastily collected the knives on the ground, as the songwriter followed close behind him. Every time he crouches and grabs the knife, the songwriter gets closer to him. It's a gamble. But when he's confident that he gathered enough knives, he stops at his track and faces the woman. 3 tentacles aimed to strike him at his left side, while the 3 remaining tentacles aimed to hit him at his right side. It was nerve-wracking, standing out in the open. However, he can't let his nerves get the best of him. When tentacles were inches away from making contact, Izuku ducked underneath the tentacles. The tentacles smashed against each other, creating one tangled mess. Swiftly, he used knives between his fingers as claws to cut through the tentacles. Honestly, he didn't expect the woman's tentacles to be something to be cut like butter. Or it could be the training he was forced to do. He would like to think that it was the former. "You bitch," the woman hissed in pain, lunging toward at him. It takes hours for them to regrow. Without hesitation, he charges at the woman and plunges the knives onto the woman's shoulders. It may have been overkill to launch a few knives at each shoulder, but it was the first thing he had thought of. "This gone long enough," Izuku said, side-sweeping the woman. The songwriter fell onto the ground, head hitting the concrete sidewalk. He cautiously approached the person to check she was unconscious. Seeing that the woman's eyes were closed and her fingers were still, Izuku knew he had successfully defeated the trio. Crouching down, he places his hand on the songwriter's forehead. He activated his quirk, Blockout. For it to work, his hand must contact the target's skin. The purpose of this quirk was to make the target forget his existence 30 minutes before the quirk was activated. That means that when they regain consciousness, the trio will forget he was here. The only way for them to remember his involvement was for him to activate his quirk again on them. If he was to do that, he won't be able to make them forget his existence, since he could only make them forget his involvement in the past 30 minutes. Standing up, he activated his quirk on the other 2 people. Once he was done, he approached the children to see if they had any injuries. He froze in shock when he was close enough to see them more clearly. Their faces, they were familiar. Cries and screams of children echoed in the empty room. A group with a mix of toddlers and children around his age had tears rolling down their faces, begging their mom and dad to save them. All he could do was stand guard, pointing a kanata at them to prevent them from bolting toward the door. His smiling gesture mask made it easier for him to hide his silently crying tears as he internally apologized to their parents. Backing away in fear and shock, he spun around to see where he ran away. At that moment, he realized that there was a large crowd of people from a distance, observing him and filming with their phones. How come he didn't realize their presence until just now? How come not one of them tried to help him? Why are they still standing there and watching him like he's exhibiting? "There you are," Hikari calls out, worriedly. She ran toward him at record speed when she noticed the fountain garden state. "I have been looking for you." Noticing Izuku's panic, she shielded the teen from the onlooker's sight and guided him back inside the conservatory. She glances over her shoulder, looking at the unconscious people on the ground. It wasn't hard to guess that Izuku had a connection to them. Izuku didn't register the following events after he was dragged away from the scene. A wave of panic and distress almost overtook him, but quickly evaporated by the familiar foggy sensation. A thick fog clouded his mind, numbing his senses. All sounds, but the ringing in his ears was muffled, blocking external noises from reaching him. His eyes weren't registering what was happening or the rapid change of scenery. How could his eyes see when they were seeing the world through a pane of glass? The fog was immediately lifted when a sudden cold sensation hit him. Jolting from where he was sitting, he looked down to see some ice cubes placed on the open palm of his hand. Blinking, Izuku saw that the ice cubes were starting to melt, and water began to drip down from his hands. Popping the ice cubes into his mouth, he began to chew the ice as he used his pants to wipe down his hand dry from the water. Chewing the ice did help him to gain awareness of his circumstances, making it impossible to return to the muddled scape in his mind. "Izuku," Hikari gently spoke. "Are you back with us?" Looking up, Izuku noticed that Hikari wasn't alone. Standing right beside her was Takashi, looking worried beyond disbelief. The man's messy hair was frazzled and drenched with sweat. Izuku doesn't remember Takashi joining in his trip to the conservatory. No, at some point, the man must have dropped everything he was doing and rushed his way over here. Wait for a second. He's not at the conservatory. They were all at the couple's home. Glancing at the window, he notices the sun is at its peak. Weren't he just at the conservatory? Wasn't it morning? How did he and Hikari come all the way from the conservator back to the apartment? Would he notice if he was dragged and taken away from the place? Izuku blurted out the first thing that popped into his mind. "What happened?" "You checked out of reality, which I don't blame you from what I heard on my here." Takashi bluntly responds, earning a jab from Hikari. Turning to face his wife, Takashi continued to talk. What? He's going to find out one way or another. A sinking feeling in Izuku's gut tells him that he will definitely not like what Takashi will say. Hikari's and Takashi's concerned expression was also a dead giveaway that he would hate the next thing that came out of their mouths. If there was one thing he learned in his short existence, the universe loves making him suffer. When things get too peaceful, the universe likes to give him the middle finger and throw more trouble at him. He hopes the universe will stay far away from his friends and parental figures. They do not need to become another punching bag for the cruel thing known as the universe. Hikari let out a breath, getting straight to the point. Several videos about your fight with the trio are going viral online. But your face is unrecognizable, Takashi quickly assured, trying to prevent Izuku from freaking out. It's very unlikely that someone will recognize you, considering you weren't facing the camera. Izuku has his head hung down, ashamed for causing more conflict for those who took him in. He knows that Takashi was trying to cheer him up and prevent him from entering the murky world his mind liked to pull him into. However, he continued to feel shame and guilt for doing something that put him at risk of being discovered, hurt, or dragged back to All for One's clutches. He also almost put the entire Shinsu family at risk for being on the villain's radar, and potentially painfully killed for the man's sick amusement. It had happened before to other kind and warm people. In the future, he's going to have to be more careful. Wherever happened today was a pure chance that he was there to save the twins, and that the videos didn't reveal his face. Even if one video showed his face, it's unlikely that someone can pinpoint his current residence or that he's going by a fake identity. No one knew that the owner of one of the top international support companies or a company owner that creates electronics for public use is housing someone like Izuku. Hikari also subtly hints that her company has a secret department focused on creating electronics for heroes and the government. I have to pull some strings to take down some of the videos that reveal bits of your face or scares, Hikari explains, not sounding mad or upset. It was a minor annoyance, so don't you dare do self-loathe, young man. If you do, I will ban you from vigilantism for 2 weeks. Izuku gasps, not believing that the woman would do something like that. Rarely does she or her husband do something so parental. They let him have his space and don't place restrictions upon him due to accepting that they can't really shield a child from the world's cruelty when he has first-hand experience. One is motherly, and the other is fatherly. Still, they understand that he grew up in charge of himself without parental interference. One needs to do that to survive under someone's influence. I can't believe you threatened to ground me, Izuku said, slightly chuckling. How are you going to do that? You guys do remember what I'm capable of? Takashi cracked a smile. By threatening to never buy those jelly pouches you always beg me to buy. Maybe I'll stop supplying you with all the cool gear you, my son, and Bakugo's kid love using. Izuku mockingly touched his heart, giving a feigned look of full offenses. Takashi's smile grew wider, while Hikari nodded in approval. The woman was also smiling, taking in great amusement at the situation. He doesn't know how else to respond, but to remaining keeping eye contact with the adults. All he could think was, how dare they come up with a reasonable threat? The audacity, the betrayal. How could they do something so cruel to him? Fine, Izuku states, his smile not leaving his face. I'll not do the whole self-loathing thing. Great, Hikari responds, giving Izuku a comforting pat. Glad we ease your worries. You don't have to worry about anyone figuring out that it was you in the video, Takashi added, giving Izuku a thumbs up. What are the chances that someone will figure out your identity and track you down? The man was about to say something else, but the sound of the ringing doorbell caught their attention. Izuku turned his head toward the door, wondering who would be at the couple's doorsteps. Hitoshi and Katsuki still had an hour left of school, so it couldn't be them. The Mitsuki and Masaru are at some fashion event, so they can't be dropping by for a surprise visit. As awful as this sound, Hikari and Takashi doesn't have friends, so that it may be one of their subordinates paying a visit. However, Izuku recalled that the couple said their subordinates would contact them by phone if they needed to discuss something urgent. Hikari and Takashi stared at each other before facing in the direction of the door. Nodding in agreement, the two of them cautiously approached the door. Izuku was quick to follow right behind them, noticing a blade glinting in the back pockets of the couple. Takashi gently pushed Hikari behind him when they made it to the door. He reached his hand toward the doorknob and cracked the door open. Sensing no real threat, he opened the door further open. Behind the man, Hikari gasps as Izuku's eyes widen in realization. Standing outside the couple's home was a tall, lanky man with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. The skinny man was not alone, for he was with the blonde twins Izuku had saved earlier in the day. The twins scanned their surroundings until they had landed their eyes on the green-haired teen. "That's the boy who saved us," the girl points out, smiling. "I didn't see his face, but I remember seeing a floof of green hair before he disappeared." "Me too," the boy added, nodding his head. "Dad, I think we found our hero." Izuku and the two adults in front of him were caught off guard when the lanky man bowed his head, giving his thanks to the teen who saved his twins from being abducted in broad daylight. He asks if he and his children can go inside to thank the teen properly. Wanting to know who this guy was, and how the guy was able to track Izuku down, the couple invited the father and twins inside their home. Ignoring the cruel sense of irony, Izuku swallowed the bile in his throat. How ironic that the father thanking him for saving his children was blissfully unaware that he was thanking the same person who abducted his children the first time. Seeing the skeletal form of the man transformed into All Might, Izuku felt guilt hitting him like a speeding train. Biting his tongue, he resists the urge to curse out at the universe for its cruel sense of irony. Here was All Might, Japan's #1 hero, profusely thanking him for saving his children on behalf of himself, his wife, and their eldest son. As the hero talked, Izuku dumbly nodded and made noises of acknowledgement to show that he was somewhat paying attention. The hero was shedding tears of gratitude, blissfully unaware of the truth about Izuku's past connection with the twins. Why, oh why, did the twins have to be All Might's children? Were the other children he was ordered to abduct at that well-guarded daycare related to other heroes? Was the boy near his age with heterochromia related to a hero? What about the kid with car-like engines on his calves? Was he related to the hero? That girl that can create stuff could also be connected to a hero or someone important. Izuku swallowed the bile in his throat, giving the best smile he could muster. "It's no big deal, All Might," Izuku states, allowing the hero to shake his hand when the hero grabbed his hand. "I couldn't stand there and do nothing as they get abducted. At that moment, I knew something needed to be done, so my legs moved on their own." "No big deal," the girl shouts, facing her brother. "He said it's no big deal to save our butts." "It is a big deal," the boy shouts back, looking between his sister and Izuku. "Makoto, didn't the video show him fighting 3 people simultaneously?" "It did," Makoto confirmed, vigorously nodding her head. "Nozomu said you would be cooler in person, which you are. Great. The twins are idolizing him without realizing that he had abducted them in the past. He doesn't deserve the kids or their father's praise and gratitude. His actions today don't justify all the awful things he had done in the past." Sensing that the teen was getting uncomfortable, Takashi abruptly cut in. "How did you find our little Izu?" Realizing he was about to say Izuku's name, Takashi pretended to sneeze and made an exaggerated sneezing noise. Everyone looked at him weirdly but quickly dismissed Takashi's actions. "Sorry about that," Takashi apologized. "As I was about to say, sometimes we call our son by his nickname, Izu." Izuku whipped his head towards Takashi when the man almost said his real name. Not the best cover-up in the world, but at least Takashi made it believable enough so others won't question it. "So how did you know who he was and track him down?" Hikari said, shifting topics. "It's not public knowledge that we have children. He knows that it is the truth." From what Hitoshi told him, the couple made sure that the school signed some NDAs that basically said that the school would not disclose to anyone that Hitoshi was a child of 2 wealthy business owners. The nice lump sum of cash given to the school under the guise of a gift also helps. However, the NDA does little to stop the bullying at the school. Still, it at least puts intense pressure on staff to punish those bullying Hitoshi due to a villain quirk. "I may have offered several autographs and a guest appearance to learn about the one who saves my children," All Might sheepishly respond. Hikari curses under her breath, muttering how she's going to restart negotiations with the conversatory's owner because of what All Might revealed. Takashi sighed, knowing his wife had forgotten about the twins' presence. The man knows that his wife's shift in personality was due to her being upset that Izuku could have been put at risk, and that the owner was explicitly told to not say anything about Izuku's presence. Izuku blinked, wondering why All Might would visit him right after the incident. Couldn't the hero send a postcard or wait until everything settled down to give his thanks? "So why are you here?" Izuku asks, genuinely confused. The hero took several steps forward until he stood before Izuku. He crouched to be on eye level, doing little to calm down the nerves eating Izuku up. All he could do was state back soft Blue's eyes that were still watery. "I have an offer for you," All Might started, briefly looking up at the couple before looking at the teen. "I will not hold it against you if you decide to accept my offer." "What's the offer?" Izuku questions, getting an inkling of where this was heading. He recalls the villain making comments about One for All that didn't make sense then. While he doesn't know much about it, he knows it's a transferable quirk, and the All Might is like the current holder. He also knows that the past holders of the quirk were a thorn in the villain's side based on his sporadic comments about the quirk. "I would like to offer you my quirk," the hero continues, returning to his small might form. "I have been looking for a successor for quite a while. When I learned what you have done, I knew that you are a true hero at heart." Izuku could hear Hikari take a sharp breath, while Takashi quietly questioned if he was hearing the hero correctly. Noticing their reactions, All Might explained the basics of his quirk and a story about the mortal injury he sustained years prior. It was due to the injury he sustained several years ago that required a couple of surgeries to pull through. However, the hero was limited in what he could do due to the injury. As time passes, his ability to stay in his muscle form dwindles. "Are you sure?" Izuku said as a voice in his mind told him that he'll be a filthy liar for leading All Might if he accepted. "Wouldn't you want to give it to your children? One of the twins would make a better successor, or the eldest son All Might speak of. One of the third-year students or a recent graduate would make a better candidate than someone like him. While the quirk would be incredibly useful in his goal to take down All for One, it felt wrong to accept it after everything he did. If the hero discovers what Izuku did in the past, and how he hurt the hero's children, would All Might still give the same offer? "It's selfish of me to ask my children to carry the burden of One for All," All Might explains, glancing at his children behind him. "And it will be selfish of me if I pressure you to become the next successor. The burden to become the next wielder of One for All, and to take my place is heavy. So I am giving you the option to accept or refuse." Izuku knows that the hero is unaware that All for One is alive, or that the villain is alive due to his quirk. The villain's presence is due to his original quirk, meaning he must take responsibility for fixing his mistake. He could justify accepting the quirk if he used it to properly end the symbol of evil and carry the burden of becoming the number one hero. It won't erase the blood he had spilled or the trail of bodies he left behind, but he owes everyone that much. "I accept your offer," Izuku spoke, hoping he won't regret it. "Thank you All Might." "Yagi," the hero said. "Yagi Toshinori." "Nice to meet you," Izuku comments. "My name is Akintani Mikumo, but like it was earlier, some people like to call me Izu. Defeating the king of the underworld will be no easy task, but it is something he needs to do for all the people he wronged. As he does that, he can see if he can uncover clues to his origins." Izuku covered his ears as Katsuki began cursing a storm about the number one hero's idiocy and apparent hatred for the oaf. However, that did little to mute the sounds of a pissed-off Pomeranian. If it weren't for the volume of his friend's voice, he would question why a hero fan was saying all these things about All Might of all heroes. Endeavor he gets. He gets the heroes under All for One payroll, though he can't find the remaining few heroes on the villain's payroll. But All Might. Why would someone hate the number one hero? Hikari popped her head out of the kitchen, shaking her head to ensure she didn't imagine a teen cursing out one of the world's most beloved heroes. Not too far from Hikari, Takashi laughed at the sight of someone vocalizing their hatred of the number one hero. Hitoshi stood for several moments before growing bored of Katsuki's yelling and disappearing for a minute. The Isanomic quickly returned with a spray bottle filled with water, hiding the item behind his back. Izuku stayed where he stood and watched, slightly curious if Hitoshi would really treat Katsuki like a misbehaving housepet. Hikari didn't notice her son concealing a water bottle. At the same time, Takashi stopped laughing to see if his son was going through with such a mischievous plan. With no one stopping the insomniac, Hitoshi approached behind the angry blonde and whipped out the spray bottle. Izuku didn't miss the slight smirk on Hitoshi's face as Hitoshi sprayed Katsuki several times with the water bottle. Hikari gasps, shocked by her son's actions. Takashi resumed laughing, proud that his son gradually embraced his mischievous side. The blonde stood, caught off guard, when he felt something wet on his neck and back. Katsuki slowly turned over his shoulder, and he stared at Hitoshi in disbelief and anger. That got the blonde sprayed a couple more squirts. "Did you fucking spray me with water?" Katsuki yelled, noticing the smirk on Hitoshi's face. "I'm not a dog." Hitoshi yawned, unfazed by Katsuki's reaction. Are you going to talk like a functional human, or must I spray you more? That's not how you treat your friend, Hikari scolded her son before facing her husband. And dear, why are you laughing? You're a grown adult. At least I didn't curse up a storm in hearing distance of All Might's children, Takashi happily reminded his wife, earning a glare. What? Noticing how the volume of Katsuki's voice was more tolerable, Izuku uncovered his ears. He really wants to know what about being a successor triggered such a reaction from the blonde. By hanging around with Katsuki, he learned that being loud was his default state, and that yelling was just something his friend did most of the time. He had never heard the blonde shout such criticism and hatred toward someone, especially not toward Japan's most beloved heroes. It was like the hero did something that purposely hurt the blonde. Izuku's mouth opens before he can stop it. What did All Might do to hurt you? Because such words and tone could only indicate a few things. Not too long ago, Izuku was the one yelling at the world for not listening to his cries, screams, and prayers to be saved. On those lonely nights before All Might and All for One fight, he would be the one banging on the walls as he shouts at his parents' abandonment, as the villain's words get to him. If he was to scream about anything else, that would somehow get to All for One, and he'll get punished. While Katsuki's shouts weren't the same, Izuku's heart could feel the hurt from his friend's voice. Pain buried in the depth of his heart resurfaced, becoming it for the hot-tempered teen to handle it. Katsuki responds, his voice low. What made you say that, nerd? Because that was me before I escaped, Izuku quietly reveals. Katsuki faces in Izuku's direction, staring at the boy's emerald eyes. Everything became unusually silent as a man's laughter, a woman's scolding, and the teens' voices stopped after the words slipped from Izuku's mouth. The world around them falls silent as if the world itself heard the boy's confessions. Birds, traffic, and the noises from busy everyday life were muted, which was rare. I wasn't tortured like you, Katsuki bluntly told the teen. He paused briefly before deciding to spill what made him so angry. But All Might and his wife fucked up. They apologized to the hag for almost running her life, but the damage has been done. So that is why Mitsuki took a hiatus in her career almost a decade ago, Hikari said in realization. I was always buying most of her products before becoming friends. Katsuki, Takashi spoke, turning serious. Tell me the truth. Did my wife and I make an error in allowing our son to accept All Might's quirk? Is All Might secretly a bad person? Katsuki shook his head, quickly explaining that All Might was a good hero, and that there was a damn good reason why the hero was the symbol of peace. The teen went on that his problem with All Might and the hero's wife is that they apparently accused them of something so sinister that they were jailed. With only the words of the number one hero, the police department immediately detained his parents, and Child Protective Services whisked him away to foster parents. Turns out the evidence was forged, Katsuki bitterly disclosed. Jailed, put on trial, and imprisoned for something they didn't do. What did All Might accuse your parents of doing? Hitoshi asks, stunned by what Katsuki revealed. The hag never told me what they were accused of, Katsuki rants, pacing and stomping around the room. His voice gradually raised the more he continued. Everything was private, so the public didn't know jack shit. My folks were innocent of whatever stupid crime All Might accused them of. Everyone was stupid to do their jobs properly, and I spent 2 years living with shit. Strange foster parents. Once the blonde calmed down, he shared how the hero and the wife made countless attempts to apologize to the couple. Gifts, free product promotions, providing much more than the legal settlement demanded from them, and everything the couple could think of. However, the bridge had been burned beyond repair, and his folks didn't have it. The two couples were thick as thieves long ago, but that was all destroyed instantly. What made it worse was that Katsuki's mother and All Might's wife had been best friends since they were 8 until the accusation. So do you hate me? Izuku asks, averting his gaze from Katsuki. Do you hate me for accepting All Might's quirk? Fuck no, Katsuki shouts, mildly offended that Izuku would believe something stupid like that. You're not All Might, and you weren't the one who royally fuck up. Besides, it's your quirk now. That's good, Izuku sighs in relief. I was scared that you would hate me. For someone smart, you can be stupid sometimes, Katsuki states. The world could label you a villain, and I will still be around you to deal with that bullshit. That's the nicest thing you said to me in a while, Izuku smiled. Didn't know you could do that, Hitoshi joins, earning a glare from Katsuki. Maybe Izuku has been a good influence on you. He may be the one who can finally teach you some manners. You little shit, Katsuki barks at Hitoshi. I can be nice when I want to. Izuku strolled to the kitchen with Hikari and Takashi, leaving his friends to their own devices. Honestly, he didn't expect things to become so eventful. After Katsuki reveals everything about All Might, he still thinks the man is a great hero, but has flaws like every other human. While he will maintain his relationship with the hero, he won't force Katsuki to do the same and keep their relationship separate. Besides, it's not like Katsuki and All Might will be interacting with each other anytime in the future. Izuku thinks 𝐬𝐬 doesn't know how much he shows his emotions on his face. As All Might, his mentor would protect and save people with his signature smile. Everyone would describe All Might as lively, friendly, and charismatic, with a bit of dramatic flair. There is no internet footage or reports of All Might showing hurt, sadness, or fear on his face. On the other hand, his mentor wears his heart on his sleeve when he is in skinny form. 𝐬𝐬 is more reserved, solemn, and open outside his hero identity. Do you have something to say? Izuku asks, noticing 𝐬𝐬 is lost in his thoughts. For the past few days, Izuku would catch 𝐬𝐬 looking at him sadly when the hero thought no one was paying attention. The hero would be frowning, focusing on the scars that littered most of his body. The shirt and shorts he's wearing are doing nothing to cover the assortment of scars that are painful reminders of his previous life. Even when Izuku wasn't looking at the hero, he could feel a pair of eyes staring at him. He hopes the hero doesn't assume that Hikari and Takashi abused him or were responsible for his scars. Because I promise you that these scars are from my life before being adopted, Izuku explains, hiding his arms behind his back. My life before the adoption was rough. Caught off guard, 𝐬𝐬 froze as deer caught in headlights before blood spewed between his teeth. Grabbing the tissues in his pocket, Izuku frantically gave them tissues to 𝐬𝐬. The hero grabs the tissues and coughs into his sleeves. Izuku also shoved his unopened water bottle to his mentor, but 𝐬𝐬 pushed the water bottle back to his chest. He winced when he noticed the hero's tired expression. When the coughing stopped, the hero used the tissues while Izuku wondered if startling 𝐬𝐬 caused the hero to get into a coughing fit. If that's the case, he must be more careful when interacting with the hero. Sorry, Izuku apologizes, becoming red from embarrassment. I don't mean to startle you. Don't apologize, my boy, 𝐬𝐬 quickly reassures. I should be the one apologizing to you. Everyone looks at them when I go out in public like this, Izuku mentions quietly, diverting his eyes to the water. I don't blame you if you were curious about them. It's ugly, and Izuku knows it. All for One and everyone associated with the villain made sure he stayed in lines by any means necessary during his early years. Lacerations, burns, and punctures were one of the few things he could expect for disobedience or failure to complete a task. He had never felt too self-conscious about how he looked until he escaped and noticed the disgusted or sad expressions of others. I don't mean to distress you, 𝐬𝐬 responds, his tone filled with guilt. I didn't notice it then, but looking at you right now, I see you've been through many things, my boy. Izuku doesn't like the guilt he hears in the hero's tone. Quickly glancing at the hero, he sees 𝐬𝐬 with a face that resembles a sad puppy. He promptly turned his attention to the waters before his mentor caught him looking at him. It seems 𝐬𝐬 is guilty of something outside his control. He recalls the hero mentioning that he feels guilty for every person he could not save. Izuku guessed that he was a painful reminder for 𝐬𝐬 that not everyone has a hero to save him. Do you regret picking me as your successor? Izuku asks, sounding nervous. He continues to not look at the hero. Are you sure you want someone like me to inherit your quirk? I will never regret my decision to pick you as my successor, 𝐬𝐬 answers genuinely. I don't know your story, but I know that you have a true heart of a hero. Hearing no traces of dishonesty or disgust in 𝐬𝐬's words, Izuku dared to face 𝐬𝐬. This time, the hero was smiling at him. Not those artificial smiles or the smile heroes put on for show. No, it was an authentic smile filled with warmth and acceptance. I know one day, you'll become one of the greatest heroes, 𝐬𝐬 continues, approaching the teen. And it's not only I who thinks this. Many in the hero circle were impressed by your actions that day, calling your actions heroic. However, some did call you reckless. Izuku brightened as he spoke. Really? I didn't know the heroes would notice my actions, much less be impressed. They were my boy, 𝐬𝐬 comments, ruffling the teen's hair. Though, they were upset that they can't find you, and that all the videos available had a poor view of you. Izuku internally thanked Hikari for being quick and efficient in removing all the videos that showed his face clearly. Takashi mentioned that he couldn't avoid public attention forever if he was to attend a hero school. He understands that. But he's waiting to gain the security that attending a hero school brings to garner attention. It's not attention he's worried about, but more of the lack of security at the moment. Then I'll do my best to become a great hero, Izuku states, visibly happy. If so many people are invested in his future, then maybe, just maybe, he can prove everything the villain told about him was wrong. Hitoshi watches as Mom sets out the plates, humming a tune to fill the silence in the room. Dad greeted the Bakugos, thanking the family for coming on such short notice. "Thank you for coming on such notice," Hikari said, gesturing to the plates and pots brimming with food. "Izuku will not be joining us due to his training with All Might," Mitsuki muttered under her breath about a blonde buffoon. Masaru whispered to his wife to take several deep breaths as he kept his anger toward the man under control. Katsuki was too focused on serving himself a plate of food and began eating. "Why did you call us at such notice?" Mitsuki questions, keeping her anger at bay. "You were very insistent that we come." "It's an interesting and complicated tale," Takashi answers, looking at his wife. "Sweetie, the love of my life, I think you should be the one to explain everything." Hitoshi saw his mom disappear for a minute before returning with a picture frame. She then approached him to hand him the photo. It was the last photo of his aunt before she and her boyfriend were declared dead by his mother. Unlike his mother, his aunt had snow-white hair and pale skin. For some reason, it always bothered him that Mom and his aunt looked nothing alike. "Aunt Usagi was not biologically my sister," his mom revealed, giving a somber look. "She was a sickly woman with a simple wish." He stares at Mom in shock, mouth agape. He was lost for words. Aunt Usagi was not his aunt. The woman who would sporadically visit was not related to him. "Our lives became intertwined the moment her biological father searched for a caretaker," his mother continued, shaking her head. "From what I remember, he hired my father to care for the sisters since their mothers died during childbirth. At least, that was the lie he told. That doesn't explain anything. How can Mom expect him to understand the significance of her revelations?" He has more questions about Aunt Usagi and his mom's past. What had Mom been hiding? What does his dad know that he doesn't? What's the purpose of the dinner they are hosting? Mitsuki was quick to cut in. "What's your intentions in telling us about your sister?" "To help fulfill her and her boyfriend's wish to protect the child they died to save," his mom states. "Child," Masaru repeats, confused by Hikari's words. He paused, thinking about the woman's words. Then, his eyes widen in realization. "You're not telling us that Izuku is somehow connected?" "Bingo," his dad confirmed. "For the kid's benefit, we haven't told him due to the guilt that may bring." "What the fuck is going on?" Katsuki shouts, earning a glare from his folks. "Mom, Dad," Hitoshi spoke up. "Tell me what's going on." Hitoshi has a sinking feeling that he knows why his parents told him that his aunt and her boyfriend were dead. If his theory was proven right, he got all the more reason to stay by Izuku's side and protect him from his past. Looking at the blonde, they nodded and silently agreed to keep the teen away from his tormentor's clutches. "There's so much I need to tell you," his mom explains. "I would like to say that it started when your Aunt Usagi's prediction quirk reveals that an emerald-haired child would end a 2-century-old conflict. But that's not where it truly began. No, it all began when I was 4 years old. Hikari wasn't always her name. It was a name she had given herself after abandoning her true name for her own protection. She remembers the day that everything started. Her father came home one day excitedly to tell her to pack her stuff. He explains that he obtained a nanny job that pays exceptionally well, and no longer had to work long hours as a bouncer in the shady bars. While one of the conditions was for him to move to his employer's residence to care for the employer's children, he was allowed to bring his family. "It's a new start for us," her father happily states, packing the essentials. "The boss seemed like a nice guy when I met him. I don't think I ever met a boss who gave a new employee a heft bonus at the start of their employment." All she could think about was making new friends and having things other 4-year-olds have. She was grateful for the nice man who hired her dad to care for his children. Her dad doesn't have to miss dinner to keep her stomach full or hear the cruel jabs at his disfigured face. No one gave Dad a chance to work due to his face. Despite him being very smart, why are people scared of his sharp canine teeth, burned scars that cover most of his face, and a jagged scar that goes down his eye? "I want to thank your boss," Hikari smiles, bouncing up and down from excitement. "He's so nice to you. He also let you bring me with you." She began to shove her clothes into garbage bags, excited for the future. The children's names were Yuzuki and Emiko. Yuzuki was the same age as her, but her body was frail. Her physical features made her look sickly. Yuzuki had pale skin, silver eyes, and hair as white as freshly fallen snow. On the other hand, Emiko had eyes that shone like emeralds and a tuft of green hair. She had never seen a newborn before, so it was amazing to watch Emiko sleep. "My little sister is cute," Yuzuki mentions, speaking over the crib. "I love her a lot." "You're lucky to have a sister," Hikari said, joining Yuzuki. "I wonder what quirk she'll get." "Maybe something like my prediction quirk," Yuzuki guesses, tilting her head. "Dad likes my quirk a lot, so I hope Emiko has a similar quirk." "Oh," Hikari responds. She was then hit with a realization. "Is that why your dad often asks you to help him?" "He asks many weird questions," Yuzuki explained, frowning. "I don't understand why he asks questions about someone called the 8th user and something called One for All." "Huh. How weird." Hikari was about to ask the girl more questions, but Emiko made the cutest little noise. "Look at the baby. She's the most adorable baby in the world. Dad gets paid extra if he is to homeschool the sisters, so he does." She and Yuzuki would sit together as Dad taught them everything. Dad's boss would sometimes visit and watch her dad teach math, science, and all the subjects one would learn at a school. The boss was an interesting man. He's tall and almost scary looking. However, he would give her candy whenever he visited. Sometimes, he would give her presents when the man gave his daughter presents. Today, it was one of those times. "Shigaraki, why are you giving me presents?" Hikari asks, giving the man a confused look. "I'm not your daughter." The man chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Like your father, you're a valuable asset. I make sure to reward those who are loyal." The man handed her a gift bag, which she impatiently grabbed. Reaching her hand inside, she pulled out a box. Oh, it was a Lego kit. She loves building stuff. How did her dad's boss know this? "I pay attention to everything that is happening," the man said, as if reading the girl's thoughts. Glancing to the side, she sees Yuzuki smiling as she hugs her new dolls. Her friend kept saying thank you to the man as she promised to continue using her quirk. Emiko was walking toward Dad, making gestures for Dad to pick her up. Expectedly, Dad did pick Emiko up and noticed a stain on the toddler's jacket. Deciding that the toddler needed a new jacket, he left the room while carrying the toddler. As her dad left the room, she noticed how the man's gaze lingered on her dad. Shigaraki came to her one day to tell her he had an offer for her. He would like to personally train her in hand-to-hand combat, believing she can surpass his best man. She immediately said yes, since Shigaraki had been so nice to her and her dad for all these years. They don't even go outside the residence since Dad's boss provides everything they need. "But why are you doing this?" Hikari questions. She wants to know the man's intentions. "You could have someone else train me." "Because you are one of mine," the man states, crouching at the girl's eye level. "And I keep things of mine very close." She was about to ask what the man meant, but Yuzuki crashed into her. The girl quickly got up and began to show off her new dress. Emiko was trailing behind her big sister, excitedly showing off the picture she drew. Hikari was so distracted by the sisters that she never had the chance to ask the man what he meant when he said all that weird stuff. Emiko's quirk was a powerful levitation quirk, but she had trouble controlling it. She practiced using her quirk by using her and Yuzuki as test subjects. Yuzuki was giggling as she was lifted up from the ground. Hikari was pretending to be a bird who could fly in the sky, making bird noises. That made Emiko laugh, losing her concentration on using her quirk. With Emiko's quirk no longer in effect, Yuzuki and Hikari quickly fell onto the ground. "Sorry," Hikari sheepishly apologizes. "I didn't mean to make you mess up." "I'll try again later," Emiko shrugs. "Right now, I want to play pretend." "Okay," Yuzuki agrees. It was one of the last things they did together before everything fell apart. Hikari was sitting on a chair as her dad braided her hair. Her dad was doing the finishing touches until Yuzuki burst through the door in a panic. The girl was breathing heavily, babbling incoherent words. Dad comforted the girl and was able to get her to calm down. Once the girl stopped crying, she had a terrified expression. "I overheard Daddy talking to someone," Yuzuki blurted out as her body began to shake. "I wasn't supposed to know. We weren't supposed to know." "Know what?" Hikari hesitantly asks. He killed our moms, Yuzuki answers as she begins to cry. He only wanted someone with his blood. He only wanted kids. What? Dad responds, tone laced with anger. He killed 2 innocent women because he wanted offspring. Hikari doesn't want to believe the man who was so nice to her. And Dad would be so awful to kill the sister's mother. Shigaraki gave her presents, trained her, and treated Dad very nicely. Why did he act so nice to her and Dad if he was so evil? She almost didn't believe it, but the look of her friend's face told her everything. This was reality, and Shigaraki wasn't the friendly, generous man he wanted them all to believe. The man has been putting up an act, and they all fell for it. But's that not it? Yuzuki continues as she turns to face the corner of the room. Hikari turned her head to see what Yuzuki was looking at. All she sees is a few dolls on the floor. He said something about making the girls into living dolls. Yuzuki continues, tone near silence. Something about preserving our innocence and not becoming like his brother. It's keeping getting worse and worse. Can a person do that? What if someone has a quirk that makes someone into a living toys? As if Yuzuki read her mind, she whispers about her father retrieving a man whose quirk can make people into living dolls. It was why Shigaraki left minutes prior based on what Yuzuki said. The girl also said that he'll be back in a few days. So we have a few days until he arrives, Dad asks as he maintains his anger. Yuzuki nods in confirmation, on the verge of tears again. Hikari looked at her dad and saw a glint of determination in his eyes. At that moment, she knew her dad was planning to save them all. We're leaving tonight, Dad declares, looking at Yuzuki. Yuzuki, go help your sister pack, but tell her nothing. The older sister nods and rushes out of the room to pack. When a minute has passed, Dad turns his gaze at her. He gave her such a sad smile. I guess everything was too good to be true, Dad sighs, shaking his head. The one person who was nice to Dad, and she turns out to be a monster after all. For a while, many people tried chasing them. They would stay at one place for a couple of days, only to be surrounded by dozens of people trying to take them back alive. On multiple occasions, they would all have close calls, and Shigaraki almost forced them back with him. It was one of those times when Dad killed the man whose quirk could make someone turn into living dolls, but did nothing to stop Shigaraki's pursuit. No, the man's obsession got worse, and they could never stay in a place for more than 2 days. I'm going to hell for this, Dad mutters. But this is the only chance for you and the girls to live normal lives. Dad quickly checked up on the girls to see if they were sleeping in the other room before returning to the living room. Calmly, he explains that they would all need to be separated and have new identities to protect themselves. At the end of Dad's explanation, Hikari was met with a serious expression, and she was instantly reminded of her quirk. This is the last time we'll see each other, Hikari frowned, clenching her fists. They don't know what we will do to them. I'm sorry, Dad apologizes. You'll need to use your quirk to erase and alter their memories. We're so lucky you haven't used your quirk on them, or else it wouldn't have worked. She knows. Her quirk is powerful and can only be used once per person. She just wished she didn't have to use it on the sisters. In the morning, she couldn't look the sisters in the eyes. Yuzuki commented that her dad always wanted a son, reminding Hikari how Shigaraki would voice out how he can't have children anymore due to his age and the effect of a quirk he obtained. At times, she didn't understand the meaning until much later in life. Would he act differently if I or Emiko were born as boys? Yuzuki sadly wonders. Hikari highly doubts it. But she kept her opinion to herself. Alone in the alleyway, Hikari held back her tears as Yuzuki cried out against Dad's hold. She was begging that there has to be a better way to handle the situation. Emiko, who was pinned down below her, was crying. Hikari activated her quirk when the youngest sister made eye contact with her. You will forget everything about your past, Hikari instructs as tears begin to trail down her face. The next time you wake up, you will remember nothing of your past. You will believe that you are an orphan, and your true name is the name on the note left in your pocket. Miko's eyes clouded under the quirk effect. Hikari pulled out the needle and jabbed it. Seconds later, Emiko fell unconscious. Getting up from the ground, she turned to Yuzuki's direction. The older sister pleaded not to do the same to her, but Hikari didn't listen. I will punch you in the face when I regain my memories, Yuzuki declared before making eye contact with Hikari. Hikari highly doubts it. Yuzuki must be triggered by something significant tied to her past, or, in Yuzuki's situation, for her to hear her true name. Seeing her true name in a written format would work the same. The same applies to Emiko's situation. Both she and Dad cried when they dropped the eldest sister's unconscious body at one orphanage and handed the younger sister to a mercenary paid to deliver 𝐬𝐽 to an orphanage across the country. The orphanages were chosen because they accepted a hefty bribe to keep the girls safe and unadoptable. The fact they were near hero agencies was an added bonus. Dad died 2 days later. One of their pursuers accidentally hit him at a vital area when they were supposed to restrain him. The pursuers stood still, realizing their mistake. Noticing the opportunity, she ran as fast as possible. For the next several years, she remained hidden in the dangerous crime-filled district, some may call the Red District. From that day forward, she changed her name to Hikari. Hikari swallowed some rice before she continued with her story. Everyone around her stared at her, waiting for her to continue the story. She may think she broke her son because he was staring at her, blinking. Her son's friend had an expression that was hard to read, but she knew the blonde struggled to process the information. By the way, Yuzuki did end up punching me in the face, Hikari revealed. Imagine, to my shock, when I opened the door one day and was met with a fist. You weren't kidding when you said there was a lot to explain, Mitsuki comments, drinking from her can of soda. And we haven't reached the part where Usagi gets involved. Usagi was Yuzuki, Hikari discloses. My father never told me the fake identities he had given them, believing that it would protect all of us in a worst-case scenario. Then you don't know the name given to 𝐬𝐽, Masaru follows up. Correct, Hikari admits. The reason why I knew Usagi was Yuzuki was because she told me herself. She regained her memories when she saw her full name written during one of her missions. Rightfully so, she was upset with me when she tracked me down. On that day, Usagi became more upset when she informed her that she didn't know the fake name her father had given to 𝐬𝐽. Reluctantly, Usagi drops the subject when she realizes that 𝐬𝐽 would be safer living without her memories. It took years, but they eventually managed to build a close relationship. She even introduced her boyfriend, Riku, to the whole family. Then, a few years ago, she and Riku told us a story of a child, Hikari recalls. Her eyes landed on the photo in her son's hands. They were going undercover, expecting to find all for one's remaining followers. No, instead, they find a traumatized child. For reasons she doesn't understand, Usagi and Riku trusted her to carry on their wish instead of someone else. While she never met Riku's family, she knows Riku is friends with his son's mother and the woman's partner. She wished that she asked them why they trusted her and her husband out of all people. They flat out told me that they're abandoning their mission, Hikari continues, earning shocked gasps from the adults. The last thing they told me was that a month after that date, I would need to search for a child that matches the description they provided. I later learned about their deaths when 2 bodies were dropped in front of the agency they worked for. What disturbed her was that Riku's body was mangled beyond belief, while Usagi's body was preserved and only a hole in her chest. A part of her thinks All for One figured out Usagi's true identity moments before the woman's death. However, knowing how possessive the villain could be, that does leave the question of why he didn't keep his daughter's body. Before Hikari could say anything else, someone unlocking the door could be heard. Seconds later, the door opened, and Izuku returned with a bag of baked goods. Unaware of the conversations everyone has been having, he happily greeted the Bakugos when he realized that they were there. So what's this about? Izuku innocently asks. Hikari, Takashi, why did you invite them? Without missing a beat, Takashi answers. We adults decided it's time to tell you. Kids, we're trying the whole polyamory thing. My wife and I are entering a polyamorous relationship with Mitsuki and Marsu. If it doesn't work out, we'll still be friends. Hikari nearly choked on her spit, not believing that this was the best excuse her husband could think of. Masaru did a spit take, spitting food all over his wife. Mitsuki had her mouth agape, lost for words. Her son gave a WTF look while Katsuki burst out laughing. Izuku blinks. Oh, so were all the double dates actually you guys dating each other? At that moment, Hikari remembered that she had married a man who could be an impulsive idiot. Still, if Izuku believes her husband's lie, she might as well play along. Yes, Hikari confirms as she walks up to where Mitsuki and Masaru are seated and forces them into a hug. We are all dating now. For the rest of the night, Hikari had to reassure Izuku that no matter how the relationship turns out, he would still be allowed to have a friendly relationship with the Bakugos. Izuku stands at the edge of a building, eyes widening in horror when he sees a small children's hospital burst into flames. The neighborhood he and his friends patrolled was poor, meaning the area's infrastructure wasn't the best. and outside assistance would take a while to arrive. "They need our help," Izuku shouts before jumping into action. He leaps from the rooftop, not leaving time for his friends to respond. For a while, he ran across the rooftops and hopped onto the next building until he was close to the burning children's hospital. He could faintly hear Katsuki cussing at him for leaving them without a plan as Hitoshi shouted at Katsuki to shut his trap. The fact that he can listen to them means they will catch up with him when he arrives at the hospital. Seeing that he was close enough to the hospital, Izuku skids to a stop on the rooftop. He was 3 buildings from the hospital, but the heat from the ashes and the isolated flames at random spots started getting to him. No, it wasn't just that. The guilt eating up his insides was the state of the building, because he once left a trail of destruction as jester. The gray cloud of smoke, the orange hue of the fire, and the residue left behind were all too similar to him. It reminds him of how much of a demon he was for creating catastrophes under the villain's orders, and the feelings of shame come back to him with full force. Doing something now will not erase what he had done. He doesn't deserve. "Are you going to do something about it?" Katsuki says, interrupting Izuku's train of thought. "Or are you going to wallow in self-pity and let the shit-face haunt you?" Even with a mask, Katsuki can read him like an open book. Izuku didn't say a word to him, but somehow, Katsuki could tell what was happening in his mind. If the game of life was fairer, perhaps they could have been friends much earlier. "You're doing something now, which is the only thing that matters," Hitoshi cuts in, looking at the hospital remains. "So, dear leader, what's your plan?" Analyzing his surroundings, Izuku notices that the fire has mostly been extinguished. Still, there are a few isolated fires scattered around the remains that need to be taken out. The residents of this neighborhood were banding together to put out the fire. A small group of individuals with water-based quirks cooperated with each other by creating bursts of water or using a form of hydrotelekinesis to transport water from other sources onto the flames. A different group attempted to patch up the wounds the hospital staff and children sustained, but that can be difficult with little to no supplies. Additionally, the unsanitary conditions of the street increase the likelihood of infections. Seeing people work together is heart-touching, but Izuku doesn't know how long the citizens can keep it up. For the time he spent homeless, he knows that the response time for poor areas is much longer. There is also the fact that no one, including heroes and the police, pays too much attention to a neighborhood like this. That's bad since there is a risk that the embers can transform back into an inferno the moment the small group runs out of stamina. "Cheshire," Izuku called out, smiling mischievously underneath his mask. "How about we give you the thumbs up to create the social media account?" "Oh," Hitoshi responds, realizing what Izuku is planning. "What types of videos do you want us to post on Twitter?" "Just make sure one of us is on the screen," Izuku explains. Something in his mind tells him he might regret it, but he pushes that thought down. "Oh, and use as many relevant tags as possible." "And the fire," Katsuki answers. Izuku kindly pointed to the dirt that was everywhere in the neighborhood. There were even shovels lying nearby to put loose dirt under the embers. Katsuki smacks and drags his palm down his face. Reasonably, he knows that using his healing quirk is an extremely risky thing to do. Katsuki is too busy putting out the fires by piling loose dirt on the flames. Hitoshi is filming himself mocking everyone for taking too long to arrive at a burning children's hospital. A local resident had pointed out that it was a non-profit hospital dedicated to helping low-income families, which added fuel to Hitoshi's harsh comments about the response time of the fire department, heroes, and every other professional who should have been there helping out. Under normal circumstances, they would have scolded him at the thought of using his healing quirk. However, they didn't argue for the first time when he initially suggested using his quirk to heal the wounded. He likes to think that he has been a good influence, and they are unconsciously adopting bits of his values. Turning to face the injured group of people, he caught sight of the burns on their skin. He swallows down the bile creeping up his throat, internally himself that he needs to focus on the wounded. Melted and peeling skins are disgusting to him, and seeing them with broken burns upsets him for not acting sooner. He hates seeing charred skins on someone who looks so young, and it saddens him hospital staff's injuries indicate that they used their bodies to shield the kids they evacuated. He looked at his surroundings and decided pulling down his face mask was safe. He recalls a nursery rhythm he heard a while back and began singing it. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." It was tempting to look over his shoulders to see how much they had recovered, but it would put his identity at risk. He hears gasps and people making comments about their skin rebuilding itself. A child's voice is shouting, encouraging him to continue singing. Another, probably a doctor, scolded the child to not exert themselves as the child started to cough. When the blazing sun is gone, when nothing shines upon, then you show your little light, twink, twinkle, all the night, twinkle, twinkle little star, how I wonder what you are. Izuku felt a pang in his stomach and became aware of the gnawing pain he's experiencing. He slips his hand into his pocket to search for a snack, but finds nothing edible. Oh no, he forgot to bring something to eat. He's tremendously hungry from using his quirk on many people and the types of injuries he healed. It's becoming hard to focus, and he thinks he's feeling a headache coming. A break. Izuku needs a break. For several moments, he catches his breath. Katsuki and Hitoshi are doing a good job getting rid of the fire and taking turns filming the scene. Oh, Katsuki is making fun and cussing at the local government as he films the small group. That's typical of him. It must be his turn filming. Hey, is that Hitoshi shoveling and chucking the loose dirt onto the fire like a maniac? Mister, a young voice spoke up. Can you put your mask on again? An odd request, but Izuku put on his mask. Once he was down, he turned to face the direction of the voice. It was a preteen girl who mainly seemed healed. The director of the Children's Hope told us that the heroes, ambulances, and police are on their way, the girl mentions. The girl points to the director, who is on the phone with someone. Izuku's made eye contact with the direction, and he was met with a kind smile. The director mouthed at him to go for 5 minutes. Getting the message, Izuku nodded and handed the girl a pile of postcards. Of course, it's the custom postcards with drawings and a motivational message. We don't want you guys to get in trouble, the girl states, holding the postcards close to her chest. You guys came when no one else did, and your singing quirk helps us a lot. We're almost completely healed. If you look over there, the helpers' injuries are almost gone, and they seem more energetic. Huh. She does have a point. Izuku noticed that the small group helping to put out the fire had most of their injuries healed and seemed to have more energy. That's odd. Was it due to being healed, or was it his quirk? That's something to wonder about when he and his friends are out of here. Cheshire, Cerberus, Izuku called out, earning his friend's attention. The police and heroes will be here in a few minutes. Great job posting the videos. It's time to get out of here. He bolted toward them, ignoring the burning pain in his muscles. Somehow, Hitoshi and Katsuki already knew of his tired and hungry state. Hitoshi put one of his arms on his shoulders, and Katsuki put his other arm on his shoulder. All together, they all left the scene. After a few minutes, they created some distance between themselves and the hospital. They heard faint sounds of police sirens heading toward the burnt hospital, indicating that the social media stint was successful. Sakachi choked on his drink when one of his coworkers showed him a trending YouTube video that showed the back of 𝗏𝗏𝗏. The video started with a vigilante singing a nursery rhythm. Then, the camera shifts to the group of injured children and medical staff. Gradually, as the sun continued, it visibly to anyone that the injuries began to heal and the skin started to mend itself. When the singing stopped, so did the miraculous healing. This is exactly what he was afraid of. It's almost 2 a.m., but the video is trending, and he suspects that various news outlets will pick up, and people from all walks of life will share their thoughts on the video. Who wouldn't? Healing quirks are extraordinarily rare, especially ones like 𝗏𝗏𝗏. He fears that once the heroes catch wind of the video, they will do everything they can to catch 𝗏𝗏𝗏. He checks the other videos the channel has posted in case they posted more videos about 𝗏𝗏𝗏. There was a video that was uploaded a few minutes ago. In the video, a teenage boy comments about the official Twitter account belonging to the trio, and the videos the group has uploaded to go along with the tweet. Sakachi is going to have a head filled with gray hairs by the next few years, thanks to the chaotic trio. Izuku wakes up to someone shaking him awake, which causes him to kick and shove the person onto the ground immediately. At first, it didn't register that the person who abruptly woke him up was Katsuki. It took seconds for him to process that he had kicked his friend in the gut, and now Katsuki was lying on the floor writhing. The blonde was cursing out a storm, but not toward him, and more about the pain. He kind of feels bad for hurting him because Katsuki was one of his first few and only friends. Hitoshi was leaning on the wall, watching the scene in amusement. That only seems to piss off Katsuki even more. And now the blonde is swearing at Hitoshi, expectedly. Hitoshi rolled his eyes and commented that he had warned the blonde not to wake him up like that. An interesting and lively start to the day. Though, he does have questions because no one ever enters his room without making their presence known if the door is closed. Whatever caused his friends to visit him in the morning without knocking must have been essential and urgent. Glancing at the window, he sees that the sun is up, and it's way past 8. His friends should be at school, so why weren't they? Did they oversleep, so that's why they woke him up? Or was it for an entirely different reason? Why did you just do that? Izuku asks, rubbing his eyes. And shouldn't you be attending school? The blonde got up from the floor, flipped Hitoshi off, and stared directly at him. The expression on Katsuki's face was unusually serious, which was starting to get him a bit worried. Someone posted a video of you, Katsuki revealed, and was met with a puzzled expression. He continued. The one time we let you sing, some fucking idiot posted you using your healing quirk. Izuku sat still on the edge of his bed. He is unsure how to process Katsuki's words because he never thought he could be caught using his singing quirk. No, it can't be, but there is video evidence circling around the internet. If the supervillain hasn't caught wind of this yet, it's only a matter of time before he does. A bounty is hanging over his head, which will only fuel the fire. His vigilante person will have a bounty, and those in All for One circle will try to bring him back. I'm sorry, Izuku apologizes with his head in his hands. I dragged you guys into this mess, and he will target you. He should have left them all alone when he had a chance. Usagi predicted that he would first garner the support of people who matched the Shinse's and Bakugo's physical characters before her sacrifice. The woman's quirk allows her to make predictions that have some truth tied to it. If it wasn't for the woman's quirk, he would leave after he recovered from his injuries. Instead, he gave them a chance when his friend's parents persuasively convinced him to give him a shot, and so he did. Soon, for once in his life, the adults fought over who had custody over him because they cared about him that much. It didn't take long for him to become attached, and he feared that the makeshift support group family would pay the price for his selfish desires. Nerd, look at me, Katsuki commands, and Izuku hesitantly looks up. The world could label you a villain, put a hit list on you, or turns against you, but I will still be around to deal with your bullshit. Even if there is a bounty over my head, Izuku chuckles nervously, shaking his head. 'Cause All for One put a bounty over my head. There was a what? Katsuki shouts. When and why didn't you tell us? Hitoshi questions, sounding upset. You need to tell us these types of things. I thought it wasn't important, Izuku responds, avoiding eye contact. I mean, you guys know that people will be after me. We would have been more careful, Hitoshi states, reminding himself to not raise his voice too loud. He's frustrated and worries about Izuku's behalf, but the greenette doesn't seem to understand. I know it's still hard to believe, but we care about you. We don't want that century-old villain to find you. Hitoshi's words worry him, but they also make him feel wanted. Hitoshi and Katsuki value him as a person, not a tool at one's disposal. They don't want to seem hurt or controlled, which brings a fuzzy feeling in his heart. The adults always said we are the chaotic trio, Izuku mentions, cracking a small smile. So I guess I should start telling you these things. Katsuki snorted, which confused Izuku. Hitoshi pulls out a strange-looking phone and shoves it before Izuku's face. One following 99,879 followers. I see all you guys did was mock and taunt the authorities, Izuku mentions as he scrolls down. Katsuki, did you really call the police department and emergency services a bunch of, yes, Katsuki cuts in. And we follow that place the stupid detective work for. He should have known that his friends would use their social media accounts to torment the heroes and everyone sent after them. He's a bit curious if someone is having a freakout at the thought of them having Twitter. This will bite them back, but he'll think about that later. 𝐲𝐴 took the cup of coffee his mother handed to him, greedily drinking every last drop. After being informed that the problem children created a Twitter profile, he needs it. The video of Rabbit using his quirk to heal the wounded being trending on YouTube did nothing to alleviate his headache. Why would they be so reckless in endangering themselves like that? Do they want to get caught? Are they treating their life as a game? Where are these kids' parents? And why are they not doing anything? You seem to care about them, 𝐀𝐦 comments as she stares at the screen. They seem like good kids. They are going to be targeted by every agency and syndicate in the country, 𝐲𝐸 groaned, rubbing his temple. Nezu scheduled a meeting tomorrow morning to discuss plans to catch the trio. No, he's not looking to have a meeting with his boss. The bastard could have scheduled it this morning when everyone was at the building and news about the trio began circulating online. Instead, they are meeting tomorrow because he's a sadistic bastard who wants the world to panic first. He sees potential in them, 𝐀𝐦 sighs, knowing that the stoat is planning something at this very second. They are young, yet they fight as if they have years of experience. That must be one of the reasons he's interested in the group. Prodigies or not, they are still children who think they are untouchable by the world. He'll admit that the trio can defend themselves against a group of common criminals, but trained professionals. Dozens of experienced heroes? That's another story. Some are making moves to catch them, 𝐲𝐸 explains, and it frustrates him that some agencies are vocal about their intentions. These are children, not tools. It's a competition to see who can get to them first and groom them to suit them. You're just like your father, 𝐀𝐦 said, tone near silent. So kind and considerate. Riku always loved children and was always protective over them. Briefly, 𝐲𝐸 thinks if it was that love for children that cost him and his father's partner his life. He quickly shook that thought out of his mind. Now is not a time for those types of thoughts. He would have loved the trio, 𝐀𝐦 continues, smiling when she sees a video of Rabbit with his back turned singing. Especially Rabbit. He loved rabbits after meeting Usagi. Even today, he doesn't know if the old man married the woman, or if they were together. They met her several times, but she was a private person. He recalls his father mentioning that she often visits the hospital because of her health condition. If anyone could protect them, it would be you, 𝐀𝐦 assured. And with the support of Yua, the chaotic trio will be protected from those who may want to use the kids. The report about Cerberus's warnings flashes across 𝐲𝐸's mind, and he knows that they need to get to Rabbit first. If it's not to protect the group from being pawns, it's to protect Rabbit from the villain the vigilante is running from. Izuku gave a sheepish smile, while Hitoshi tried to minimize the hole they dug for themselves. Not too far, Hikari was pacing in circles as she lectured them on their reckless behavior. Takashi was unusually quiet, looking worried. It was an expression Izuku had never seen on the man's face, making him feel a little uneasy. Compared to the other things he, Hitoshi, and Katsuki had gotten into in the past, this might have been their biggest mistake so far. How were they supposed to know someone was recording him using his singing quirk, or that the video would be uploaded around the same time they created their group's official media account? It was all bad timing. You are all banned from vigilante activities, Hikari states, her tone soft but firm. She stopped pacing to look at the children. I know I'm much more lenient than other parents, but there is a limit. Starting today, you boys will not be allowed to patrol. You can't do that, Izuku protests loudly, interrupting the mother. Seconds after his outburst, he quickly covered his mouth with his hands. Out of instinct, he averted his gaze and looked down at the ground. He should be apologizing for reacting like this. They are going to be so mad at him for being so defiant. He can already feel the phantom feelings finger gripping his chin. He must brace himself for being flung across the room like a rag doll and, Izuku, a gentle voice called, breaking Izuku from his thoughts. Izuku, you're free. You're not under his control. Izuku hesitantly looked up from the ground and saw the expression on everyone's faces. Takashi's expression was unreadable, but the man's clenched fists indicated he was angry. Hitoshi's expression was neutral, as always, but he could have sworn he heard his friend curse the supervillain. On what remains a mystery since Hitoshi stopped when he realized that Izuku was watching him. Hikari gave him a warm smile, but he could see the sadness in her eyes. Sadness that was directed toward him. What he did to you was cruel and inhuman, Takashi spoke, keeping his anger in check. He doesn't want to startle and scare the kid. And we're sorry we can't do more to erase the fear he ingrained into you. We're not mad at you for speaking what's in your mind, Hikari continues as Izuku gives her a disbelief look. In fact, we encourage you to speak out and share what's on your mind. Without the yelling or throwing a temper tantrum, Hitoshi interjects. Correct, Hikari confirmed as she walked toward her Hitoshi to ruffle his hair, much to the teen's protests. Another thing you kids forgot is to not interrupt someone until they finish talking. Izuku just realized that he blurted out what was in his mind, and never let Hikari finish what she was going to say. The woman said something about banning his vigilante activities, which upset him. He felt upset enough to speak his mind. In the past, before meeting such kind people, he would never allow his emotions to get the best of him. He learned the art of silence and submission because it kept him alive for the first 12 years of his life. Less mockery, fewer bruises, and less pain running through his veins. More food, more sleep, and more time spent alone. Now, in the present, he no longer lives in that dark world. But it's hard to unlearn the things forced upon him. If you let your mother continue, she would have told you boys will not be allowed to patrol until you complete your entrance exams, Takashi reveals, cracking a smile. Me, your mother, Mitsuki, and Masaru agreed that all vigilante activities should be stopped until things calm down. So it's not permanent, Izuku nervously asks. Oh gosh, no, Hikari answers as Izuku sighs in relief. We know how important it is to you. It's only a temporary ban. Temporary is good. It means he won't have to give up his rabbit persona for the rest of his life. Actually, rabbit is supposed to be temporary until he ends All for One, finds the truth about his origins, and graduates from a hero school. A few months of no patrol is not the end of the world. He could focus more on homeschooling and getting accustomed to living in a society. Katsuki always bluntly points out how he's nervous when surrounded or watched by too many people, which will happen when they go to high school. On the other hand, Hitoshi mentions that he acts like a sheltered kid, even though that is far from the truth. Are we grounded though? Hitoshi asks. At that moment, Izuku is reminded that Hikari and Takashi are parents. Parents guide, love, teach, and protect their children. Part of being a parent is imposing restrictions and disciplining children who act out of line. Izuku is adopted, and the couple refers to him as their son when interacting with other people. He's technically their son on paper, and they genuinely care for him. Oh no, he's totally grounded. There's no escaping it. For a week, Hikari responds in a cheery tone. Hitoshi, you are to head straight home after school, and no electronics when you're in the house. Izuku, the same rules apply to you, but you can still train with Yagi. That's not cool, Hitoshi simply said. It wasn't our fault in the first place. Knowing better than to argue his case, Izuku went to the kitchen and grabbed a jelly pouch. From the kitchen, he heard Hitoshi argue that it was the civilians' fault for recording and uploading the video. The mother quickly retorts that they were not grounded solely for the video, but for creating a Twitter account. Izuku then vaguely remembers the couple warning them that they would be grounded if they were to do anything reckless to garner media attention. He can see why he and Hitoshi were grounded. Hopefully, Katsuki survives his lecture and gets away with only a grounding. Izuku would later find out that Katsuki was grounded for an extra week because he cursed out the police in Heroes. Izuku thinks when Hikari said that he was grounded, it meant that he was not allowed to go out to town and do fun activities. He was supposed to go straight home after training with All Might. Hikari told the hero that he was grounded and lied straight to the hero's face about the reason. Yagi believes he Parker with his friends past curfew and accidentally made a dumpster explode. No, instead of going home, Yagi's twins begged their father to let him join in their trip to the museum. He's not going to question why Yagi brought his children to watch them train, but it was nice to hear the twins shout words of encouragement and say all those nice things about him. It helps that the twins weren't disturbed or disgusted by his scares. I didn't know Nozomu and Makoto were huge Heroes fans, Izuku mentions as Nozomu vigorously nods. Dad is a hero, so of course we love Heroes, Nozomu proudly states. Heroes are the good guys doing all the right things. Izuku swallows the bile creeping up his throat as memories of the heroes working for All for One resurfaced. Now is not the time to have these thoughts. It's not the twins, or All Might's fault that they haven't experienced the darker sides of humanity. Do you and your sister want to be heroes? Izuku asks, already knowing how the kids will respond. Yep, Makoto confirmed, giving the teen her biggest smile. When I'm older, I'll be your sidekick. Her comment suddenly made him feel a pang of guilt. Would she or her brother still give him looks of admiration with shining eyes if they were to learn the truth? No, probably not. I'm not that old, Izuku points out. You'll probably be my co-worker thought. Izuku was about to ask about their quirks until they reached the museum. It was quite busy with all the people leaving and entering the museum. A tiny part of him regrets being pressured by two 9-year-olds to join them on the museum trip. He doesn't do too good with people and has little experience in what his friends like to call social skills. Living in isolation with one's only interactions with people is being treated like an expandable pawn would do that to a person. I don't have money to pay, Izuku quietly verbalizes as his cheeks reddened. He doesn't know why he's so embarrassed. Maybe his nerves are getting the best of him. I didn't expect a surprise trip to the museum, since I'm grounded for a week. I'm paying for the ticket, Akintani, Yagi told the boy. But please, don't tell your parents. Dad said that Hikari is a scary lady, Nozomu blurted out. Yagi sputters at his son's words, blood spewing out of his mouth. Nozomu, those are not my exact words. Izuku laughs at the scene, enjoying the heroes and twins' interactions. Grabbing the pamphlets on display, he vibrates with excitement. This was the first time he stepped into a museum. Something about the hero makes him feel calmer than usual when in a busy public place. You have never been to a museum? Yagi asks, noticing his successor's excitement. Never, Izuku confirms, eyes looking at every nook and cranny of the museum. My life before the adoption, I never had opportunities to do stuff like this. After over a year of staying with the couple, they gradually introduce him to things. It's the reason why Katsuki and Hitoshi always take the first initiative. They warm him up to a new place or activity so as not to overwhelm him. If he has someone he knows beside him, his nervousness will be replaced with excitement because he'll have one person to help him with the experience. Izuku liked to think Yagi is one of those people. By how the hero responds to his answer, Yagi makes sure to speak quietly enough so only they can hear. Better late than never, Yagi said quietly. Let us guide you to your first experience at the museum. For the next 2 hours, Izuku spent time with the hero and twins. They looked at the fossils of different dinosaurs on display. During that time, Izuku's heart felt a little bit lighter. Izuku leaped several feet backward, getting into a fighting stance as a figure landed close to him. It was only supposed to be him and Yagi at the beach today. Whoever the person was, they are no ordinary person. A familiar aura exudes from the man, an aura he must have sensed during his time as jester. When he noticed the scarf, he became hyper-focused on that item. Anything could be used as a weapon, even as simple as a scarf. There was also something about it that brought up memories. Not taking any chances, he added more distance between them. One can never be too careful out in the field. Immediately after putting a reasonable distance between them, he hikes a leg up and takes out the knife hidden in his shoes. Blinded by his need to protect his mentor and himself from the mysterious figure, he almost hadn't noticed Yagi shouting at him. Wait, Yagi shouts, taking a moment to cough into his sleeves. He's not here to hurt us. As the hero's words sink in, Izuku skids to a stop a few feet away from the man. Oh, he let his instincts get the best of him again. However, how should one react when someone randomly appears out of nowhere? Now, he embarrassed himself in front of someone Yagi is acquainted with. Nervously, he turns to get a better look at the man. The man looks back with a raised eyebrow. Izuku fidgets under the man's intense stare, sensing the stranger watching his every movement. It's unsettling, and he doesn't know what to do or say. It's just an awkward silence between them. Izuku doesn't know why, but he feels like the man silently judges him for what he did moments ago. It could also be the man is analyzing his actions and coming up with his own conclusions. Honestly, he doesn't know what's worse. Sorry for attacking you, Izuku apologizes, stumbling over his words. And almost stabbing you, and thinking you were a villain. Getting a better look at the stranger, Izuku saw a worn-out man who looked like he hadn't gotten any sleep for days. The man's hair was messy, unkempt, and reached to his shoulders. The most important feature of the man is that he is dressed in all black, and has a pair of goggles almost completely hidden underneath his scarf. Izuku took a step back, when the memories of a rainy night hit him like a speeding truck. He twisted another knife onto the figure's shoulder to match the knives plunged into the figure's stomach, calves, and arms. From afar, one of All for One's minions shouted at him to end it. Terrified of the consequences of disobedience, but not wanting to kill the people he wasn't ordered to kill, Izuku did the one thing that could potentially give the man a chance to live. The scarf was flung toward him, and Izuku quickly sidesteps to the left. Without wasting time, he bolted toward the man and slammed him into the dumpster. As the man slumps to the ground, he walks toward the man and shields him from the follower's line of view. He tried his best to make it look like he was checking the man's vitals, but that was not the case. Instead, he sang quietly, squeezing a certain pressure point to knock the man unconscious. Before he left the man alone in the alleyway to the world's mercy, he placed a hand on the unconscious man's forehead to activate his quirk. If the man lives, he will forget what happened in the past 30 minutes. Unknown to the follower, Izuku had sent an SOS message on the man's phone. As if the universe wasn't trying to make his life significantly harder, it threw a curveball. It reintroduced the person he left bleeding in the alleyway back into his life. That must be why he reacted strongly when the stranger first appeared. He unconsciously views the man as a threat. "Akintani, my boy," 𝐬𝐬 spoke, breaking Izuku out of his thoughts. "I want to introduce you to my eldest son." He swallows back the bile and musters up every ounce of courage to maintain eye contact with 𝐬𝐬's son. His past is returning to haunt him, and everyone he had hurt in the past is blissfully unaware of it all. He can feel the guilt creeping alongside the sins crawling on his back. As if the world doesn't want to punish enough for kidnapping 𝐬𝐬's twins, it makes him interact with a guy he left in the alleyway, who also happened to be the eldest son. "I'm 𝐴𝐾𝐻 𝐬𝐬," Izuku sputters out embarrassment and hidden shame. "Again, sorry for trying to stab you." Izuku stretches his arm out to shake the man's hand. He was told it was polite when introducing himself to someone new. When the man continued to stare at him, Izuku was about to pull back his arm, but the figure took his hand to shake it. "You're the kid who went into a knife fight with 3 criminals, the man said, releasing his grip on Izuku's hand. "Yeah," Izuku hesitantly responds. "I saw them kidnapping Makoto and Nozomu, so I had to do something. The songwriter would have gotten away if I stood there and do nothing." For the longest time, he wonders if the man has survived or died from blood loss. Although he didn't want to hurt the man, he had to because he was being monitored by one of the villain's followers to ensure he was following orders. It's both haunting and relieving to see the man alive and well. To think he was almost responsible for killing 𝐬𝐬's eldest son. 𝐬𝐬 continued with a pat on the man's shoulder and a smile. "Young Akintani here saved the twins from being abducted. There is nothing I can do to ever repay him for saving them." He knows his mentor is praising him, but it makes him feel absolutely disgusted at himself. There's an ugly pit in his stomach, and he knows it's because how he doesn't such praise from the hero. Why does hanging out with people associated with 𝐬𝐬 always make him have a crisis? "Suwuo," Izuku comments, looking at 𝐬𝐬 and pointing at the unknown man. "What's his name?" "Aizawa Shouta," 𝐬𝐬 beamed, slapping the man's shoulder. "He's a good lad I proudly call my son. I have the honor of being his stepfather." "Oh, are they not related by blood?" He didn't want to assume, but it made sense. The father and son share no physical characteristics between them. Maybe the only thing they have commented on is how they're both tall, or maybe he's just short. "I was the practice child," Aizawa spoke in a serious tone. "I was the prototype child as my siblings were the final product." "You were not the practice child," 𝐬𝐬 sputters, caught off guard. "Don't tell lies to young Akintani. You're making me sound like a bad father." It was faint, but Izuku noticed that Aizawa had a faint smirk on his face. He's going to guess that Aizawa likes teasing 𝐬𝐬. At least it's a healthy family relationship, and they seem to enjoy each other's company. It's also amusing to see the number 1 hero easily embarrassed. It makes him seem so human. "Wait," Izuku cuts in. "Not that I want you to go, Aizawa, but why are you here?" "You haven't told him?" Aizawa asks incredulously. "We spent the past few weeks discussing it." "I wanted to surprise him," 𝐬𝐬 justified, looking a bit sheepish. "Your successor was startled and tried to stab me," Aizawa points out bluntly. He then looked at the teen as he continued to speak. "He doesn't look like he likes unexpected guests." "I said I was sorry," Izuku states, unsure how else he was supposed to respond. "I thought you were trying to hurt us." "It's fine, problem child," Aizawa said. "It's not your fault the oaf didn't tell you anything." Problem child. Why in the world would Aizawa call him that? Only one person has ever called him by that term, and because of him, that man is 6 feet under. A part of him hoped Aizawa had no connections with Riku, and problem child was a common nickname. Also, he hasn't done anything to warrant a nickname like that. Wait, did 𝐬𝐬 tell him about how he was grounded? No, it has to be how he ran headfirst toward him, and about to throw hands. It has to be that. "Problem child," Izuku repeated, blinking at the man. "Why did you give me that as my nickname?" "If Toshinori chooses you as his successor, that automatically means you share some problematic tendencies with him," Aizawa explains as if it were obvious. "Selfless, protective, reckless, and little self-preservation." Izuku gave a small chuckle when he saw 𝐬𝐬 stammering in his words, trying to disprove everything Aizawa had said. The more the hero tries, the more embarrassed he gets as Aizawa reveals embarrassing things the hero had done that prove his point. "So, Izuku interrupted. You were about to tell me why you were here until I changed topics. Aizawa flashes him a Cheshire grin that reminds him of Hitoshi when his friend is up to something. To make sure you don't break your bones, Aizawa reveals. We don't want your bones to break when you use one for all during the entrance exam because of Toshinori's poor teaching. I will train you from today until the day of the entrance exam. Get ready to go plus ultra because I will push you beyond your limits. Oh no. Izuku got an inkling that it would be like training in hell based on the manic grin the man had after he was done talking. Aizawa Shouta first heard of Toshinori's successor from word of mouth. Makoto wouldn't stop talking about the successor's heroic actions for 5 days straight. Nozomu isn't as bad as their sister, but he does ask plenty of questions about how he can be cool as the teen. To say that he doesn't want his younger siblings to emulate the mysterious teenager was an understatement. Under no circumstances does he want them to charge headfirst into conflict, or to think they could escape any situation unscathed by copying the teen's reckless action. Toshinori did always say one for all works in mysterious ways. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 chuckles slightly, amused by her son's deadpan expression. If Toshinori chooses this teen as his successor, there is nothing we can do about it but support his actions. Unlike Sasaki, he will respect Toshinori's choice. While he does question his stepfather's choice to pick a teen who causally carries a knife and gets into a fight with experienced criminals, he, at the very least, trusts his judgment. Toshinori may be clueless, but he has the intelligence and foresight to make the correct judgment call. If only the former sidekick could understand and respect that decision. Ultimately, it's his stepfather's choice to pick his successor. A random teenager who saved his younger siblings. Sure, it's not the worst choice out there. It's no surprise to him that the man chose someone who shared the same traits as the man. Reckless, impulsive, and too stubborn to back down from a fight. The successor probably has the personality of a golden retriever or an extrovert. What does surprise me is that his successor is from a very wealthy and secretive family, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 quietly wonders before covering her mouth. You weren't supposed to tell me that, were you? Shouta responds as his parent let her nerves get the best of her. No, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 embarrassingly admits. Knowing that keeping it a secret from her son is pointless, she continued. Toshinori told me about a private meeting he had with his successor's parents, which was akin to them threatening him never to hurt their sons. A rich kid. He didn't expect Toshinori to pick a teenager from such a background. Considering the man's bleeding heart, he expects his stepfather to pick a random kid off the street, someone from an orphanage or a quirkless kid. From the information he gathered, he viewed the successor as someone from a privileged background, but with a heart of gold similar to his stepfather. Toshinori picked an interesting character to become his successor. From how his siblings talked about their savior, he was under the assumption the teen was a bold, confident, and cheery individual. They both mentioned how the kid was unfamiliar with everyday activities and always asked questions that an average person would know. A recent example Toshinori shared was how the teenager asked him what's an amusement park. As his siblings and stepfather share more stories about the successor, he assumes the kid lived a sheltered life. Shouta's assumptions were disproven when the teen stopped what he was doing and jumped several feet in the air. The teen put a good distance between them, allowing him the chance to pull out his knife hidden in his shoes. He stood and watched what the teenager would do next. This was an interesting turn of events. Based on how everyone had described the child, he didn't predict the teen would act like a cornered animal ready to maul him to pieces. Something flickers in the kid's eyes before he charges directly at him. Something protective and determined. He would have seen how everything played out. But his stepfather shouted that he wasn't there to hurt them. Immediately, the kid did a 180 and skidded to a stop. Suddenly, the teenager looked embarrassed and flustered as he spouted countless apologies for his actions. As Toshinori gave basic introductions to each other, with him occasionally gracing the man with a response, he noticed several things about the successor. Akintani Mikumo is a teenager who doesn't look too confident in himself. There are moments of hesitation in the boy's actions and words, as if he's thinking of all the potential consequences for one action. Words of acknowledgement and praise make him uncomfortable and silent. Akintani would avert his eyes as his cheeks flushed. This wasn't the attitude he expected when his siblings and stepfather first told stories about the teenager who recklessly dives into danger. Sometimes, when he makes eye contact with the kid, he is met with eyes that see too much of the world. An assortment of scars decorates the teen's body, and he wonders what type of life the kid has experienced. Not once did Toshinori or the twins mention anything about 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭 scars? Was the kid sheltered because something had happened to him, and the parents wanted to protect their son from future danger? Did 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭 scars play a role in how secretive the teen's family was and the threat they had made to Toshinori? Why did you say Yagi is a bad teacher? 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭 innocently asked as the man coughed out scarlet droplets. He has been helping me train my muscles to handle one for all. Oh child, there was a reason mom banned Toshinori from helping the twins with homework. The oaf can't explain anything unrelated to hero work, and the last time he tried, someone needed to reteach the twins how to multiply and divide. 𝐜𝐡𝐢, don't you dare tell anything to young 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭, Toshinori cuts in, giving the best disappointed father look he could muster. I thought you were better than this. He turns toward his stepfather, flashes a grin, and turns back to face 𝐻𝐴 with a neutral expression. He was why my siblings almost failed math, 𝐜𝐡𝐢 revealed, ignoring Toshinori's pleas to stop. He tried teaching us how to make an American dish called pancakes, but accidentally taught us how to make scones. Scones is not a typical dish, but somehow, Toshinori accidentally taught them to make scones despite never eating one. Do you have more stories? 𝐻𝐴 hesitantly asks, clearly interested in hearing more stories. 𝐜𝐡𝐢 continued to ignore Toshinori's protest as he told more stories about his stepfather's blunders and how his siblings' school banned the man from ever helping the twins with their homework. 𝐻𝐴 said his goodbyes, thanking everyone for spending the time and energy to help train. 𝐜𝐡𝐢 watched as the kid sprinted toward what he assumed to be home. When he confidently believes that the kid is out of hearing range, he brings up the elephant of the room. Can you tell me why your successor looks eerily like mom? 𝐜𝐡𝐢 questions, ignoring how 𝐻𝐴's facial features brought up memories of his dead brother. Or how 𝐻𝐴 is covered in scars. You noticed it too, Toshinori said with a sad smile. If you're worried that I picked 𝐻𝐴 as my successor because of how much he resembles Izuku, know that it wasn't the reason. Logically, 𝐜𝐡𝐢 knows that. However, seeing someone who resembles Izuku, if he had the chance to grow up, resurfaces some old feelings. It's not the teenager's fault that he shares facial characteristics with his dead brother, or that he was unaware of Izuku's existence. His parents never mention Izuku, making his dead brother a taboo topic to talk about at home. If Toshinori wouldn't talk about Izuku at his own home, or the people closest to him, then it should be no different with 𝐻𝐴. He has opinions about how his parents avoid bringing Izuku into conservation and act like Izuku never existed. Now is not the time to bring it up. He doesn't want to get into another argument with Toshinori. When I heard the story of how a child charged into danger to save my children, I wanted to thank the boy, Toshinori explains. Then, I saw the video of how he stood up against 3 criminals to save my children. At that moment, I knew he was worthy to inherit my quirk. Do you know his background? 𝐜𝐡𝐢 questions, remembering the scars all over 𝐻𝐴's body. He is very good at keeping his past a secret, Toshinori said, letting out a breath. The most he had ever said was that he had a rough life in the streets before being adopted for less than 2 years. That explains why 𝐻𝐴's first reaction to a surprise visit was to fight. If 𝐜𝐡𝐢 had been told about this crucial information, he would have approached the teenager much differently. After today, his initial assumptions were proven wrong, and his view of the boy had changed. No matter 𝐻𝐴's past, 𝐜𝐡𝐢 will be here to teach him the skills he'll need to become a successful hero. 𝐻𝐴 had potential, and he didn't want the kid's potential to go to waste. Masaru turned to face Hikari as their respective partners began to squabble. Takashi destroyed another door handle for the 10th time, which was becoming a minor inconvenience. It had reached the point where Masaru took the time to learn how to replace the door handle at less record speed and prepared a box of door handles to use when Takashi invariably broke another one. Is your quirk super strength? Mitsuki loudly asks, forgetting that her husband was nearby. The answer will be no, Takashi happily responds, fidgeting with the door handles with a hand. It would be a lot easier if that was the case. It's still surreal to have people actively trying to invite them to spend time together doing something exciting or mundane. Seeing his wife be herself around others after years of living isolated from the public is an oddly comforting sight. How long ago was it since they had people they could confidently call their friends after the grave accusation thrown at them? The time spent being interrogated, sent to prison, speaking to lawyers, waiting for the result from the investigation, and being released is all blurred together. This is why we have a new piece of furniture every week, Hikari simply said, as if it was obvious. He tends to break everything by accident because of his strength. It's not my fault, Takashi shouts, his gaze landing on his wife. You try having your genetics altered in an illegal government experiment. 0 out of 10, I would not recommend. There are so many questions brought up from that statement alone. Do he and Mitsuki naturally attract people with interesting pasts or something abnormal? First, it was 𝐀𝐻𝐭's odd circumstances regarding her being mysteriously left at the entrance of the orphanage and her amnesic state. Then, it all might with his hiding a 2-century-old secret. Is that why you were so adamant in temporarily stopping our son's vigilante activities? Masaru followed up. He didn't ask questions when he instantly received a call from the couple, practically begging to ensure Katsuki avoided vigilante activities until after the entrance exam. Considering the implications of the couple's past, he trusts their judgment on matters such as these. One day, I will tell you more, Takashi promised, his smile faltering momentarily. As quick as his smile falters, he returns to his signature smile. When we have a tracker embedded in their vigilante-geared and everyday items, I will tell you something that sounds like a government conspiracy. Then there were Hikari and Takashi. One was associated with Japan's most dangerous villain and lived in the Red District for part of her childhood. The other was definitely a part of an illegal government experiment, which grew his distrust toward others. You will be keeping this to yourselves, Takashi insisted. We don't want our sons to have more stressors pile on top of them, or for them to stick their noses in business, not involving them. There was a moment of silence that lingered. It was quiet aside from the noises that came from outside until, "What's up with your pasts?" Mitsuki blurts out, making Hikari chuckle. Despite their complicated past, the couple were among the best people they had ever known. Masaru will count himself lucky to have befriended such people. Izuku felt a sudden burst of excitement when Hitoshi and Katsuki brought him to the entrance of an arcade. He turns his head and makes eye contact with his friends, who are staring at him with an amused expression. Quickly, he grabs both of his friends' hands and excitedly pulls them inside the arcade. When Hitoshi abruptly woke him up this morning, he was told they needed to do something important today. It hadn't crossed his mind that Hitoshi meant spending a day at the place filled with games. I have never been to an arcade, Izuku mentions, vibrating with how happy and excited he was. I don't know where to start. Izuku saw so many games and things to do here. Checking his surroundings, he sees neon lights, colorful machines, mats used for dancing, the cutest plushies he had ever seen, and a few people dressed in uniforms. It was empty, probably because it was morning on a school day, but it was still great. He had only dreamed of entering a place like this when he caught the sight of kids and teenagers playing in a flashy arcade while stalking his target. He forgot that he was dragging his friends around until he suddenly came to a stop with a tug. It must be Katsuki since he's the first one to call him out of his behavior. Sheepishly, Izuku looked over his shoulder and gave an awkward smile. I want my hand back, Katsuki states, attempting to pull his hand free from Izuku's grasp. We can't play the games without our hands, nerd. Izuku releases his grip from his friend's hands. He didn't realize how hard his grip was until Hitoshi began rubbing his wrist. Katsuki didn't care, but Izuku caught the red marks on his friend's wrist. Maybe he wasn't subtle about how he was staring at Katsuki's wrist, because the blonde quickly shoved that hand into his pocket. Catching on, Hitoshi was quick to do the same. I'm sorry, Izuku apologizes with a guilty expression. Unaware of him, he looked like a kicked puppy. I didn't mean to hurt you too. Sometimes, I forget about my own strength. You're strong for a pipsqueak, Katsuki comments. He then notices Izuku's expression. Hey, don't give us that look. We're not mad at you. Is there something on his face? Izuku touched his face to see if something was sticking to it, but he felt nothing. Maybe his lips were chapped. Pulling a capstick, he began applying it. Katsuki tends not to directly say what's bothering him or what's on his mind on some occasions. Also, Katsuki is gentler and friendlier toward him than Hitoshi. Maybe Katsuki didn't want to offend him, and this was all he could say. It's fine, Hitoshi said, hoping Izuku would stop looking at him with a kicked puppy expression. Mom said that Dad was like that when they first met. Don't worry about it. Really, Izuku responds and immediately brightens up. I didn't know that. Dad does break furniture and the things he owns on accident, Hitoshi adds, chuckling at the memory. However, it has been a while since he broke anything. He broke the old man's door handle when he and his wife went to pick my parents up for a date, Katsuki points out. This was this morning. That makes sense, considering how tall and built the man was. It had been a while since he had thought of Takashi as anything else than a silly goofball who loved his family and messing with people. He couldn't believe the snippets the couple had shared about Takashi's past almost slipped his mind. From what Hikari told him, Takashi was unusually strong, without having a quirk related to strength enhancement. He also recalls Takashi saying he had some old habits that were difficult to break. At first, Izuku didn't understand the dad's comment. But now, he's starting to think he's referring to his strength. That can explain why there is a new piece of furniture or appliance every week, Izuku smiles. Though, I'm confused why he never broke anything before me. He's extremely mindful around you, Hitoshi points out as Izuku tilts his head in confusion. Dad doesn't want you to be scared of him, so he's extra careful. So his initial fear of Hitoshi's dad didn't go unnoticed by the couple. He can't help but feel guilty for potentially offending the man, until he remembers that Takashi was not that type of person. Takashi is understanding, and a man he wishes he had as a father. I'm so lucky, Izuku whispers as he unconsciously lays a hand on top of his heart. There was a warm feeling in his heart, and he relished that feeling. As silly as it sounds, feeling that warmth to the core can overwhelm his feelings of happiness. He wants to keep this warmth and joy for the rest of his life. He'll do anything to continue having these feelings, because he can never return to a life devoid of light, warmth, and happiness. He had a taste of what life offers and wanted more of it. Aw shit, Katsuki blurted out. The nerd is crying. What did you do? Hitoshi questions, glaring at Katsuki. I didn't do anything, eyebags, Katsuki answers, visibly annoyed at the teen. Why do you always assume it's me? Gently touching his cheek, he feels the tears trailing down his cheeks. He didn't realize he was crying. He wipes his tear-stained cheeks with the sleeve of his shirt. I'm just so happy, Izuku sniffles, catching his friend's attention. Never in my dreams, I thought I would be this happy. Hitoshi and Katsuki looked at each other with unreliable expressions. Then, Katsuki pointed to a crane game no one was using and waved his massive bag of tokens. Izuku didn't notice Katsuki was carrying a bag. Guess you never experienced the joy of winning a prize, Katsuki comments. Or winning more prizes than everyone else. Is that a challenge? Hitoshi asks with raised eyebrows. That's some big talk from a Pomeranian. Say the one who lost against me in Mario Kart, Katsuki grinned. Loser pays for lunch, unless you're too much of a chicken to go against me. Fine, Hitoshi said, smirking. I hope you are ready to empty your wallets because you are treating me and Izuku to a feast. What about me? Izuku cuts in. Do I have to participate? Apparently, he gets a free pass because this was between Katsuki and Hitoshi. Also, they find it unfair to challenge someone who has yet to play a crane game. He gets that. No matter who the loser is, they both agree to treat him to lunch. That's fine with him because that means spending more money for himself. I go first, Katsuki declares as he bolts to the crane game. Hell no, Hitoshi calls out as he follows Katsuki. Izuku shakes his head as Katsuki and Hitoshi race to the crane game. Curious about who would win, Izuku strolled to the crane game. He heard Katsuki and Hitoshi taunting each other to get a rise of each other. It's silly, and Izuku loves it. He hopes to have more moments like these in the future with them. Izuku can see Katsuki struggling to keep up on the platform, as the arrows on the screen get progressively faster from the corner of his eye. To think it was Katsuki's idea to play this dancing game in the first place. How the fuck are you winning? Katsuki yells, briefly glancing at Izuku. This is your first fucking time playing Dance Dance Revolution. Honestly, he has no clue. It would be a completely different story if Hitoshi's parents didn't pay for the arcade owner to rent out for their personal use for the day. If there were an audience, he knows for certain that he would have crumbled, fumbled, and tumbled to the ground by now. He later learns that without a mask to hide his expression, he doesn't do well in heavily crowded places, or anywhere there is a large audience. Izu, you have to avenge me by winning, Hitoshi calls out, dismissing the glare he received from Katsuki. No, he does not, Katsuki shouts back. Eventually, all good things must come to an end. When the song ended, their rating popped on the screen. Seeing that he scored a higher rating and Katsuki's shocked expression was highly entertaining. Was Katsuki overestimating his ability to do a fast-paced game in a difficult setting? That's what Izuku thinks. I still don't know how I did it, Izuku mentions his thoughts aloud. Maybe my past experience made it easier, probably. He recoils at one of his memories. It was a hazy memory, but he remembers sprinting toward what he perceived as an exit from his prison. In the end, leaping, nimble footwork, and wheel poses that transform into elaborate flips were not enough to outspeed a supervillain and a punch to the gut. That was one of his several escape attempts before he stopped trying. At least stopped trying until two special people lit a fire in him. However, he wishes his successful escape attempt didn't cost 2 lives. Shoving that memory to the depths of his mind, Izuku stepped off the platform. Noticing Hitoshi's hand in the air, he gave his friend a high five. "You got beaten by Izu," Hitoshi comments, taking great amusement from the situation. "Didn't you say you were better than us extras?" "The nerd can almost do everything better than we can," 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 responds, shooting Hitoshi an unamused look. "Should have known he could beat me in a stupid game." "That was fun," Izuku happily states. "I can't wait to try something new again. Aren't we going somewhere new to eat? At least somewhere new to me." "An all-you-can-eat buffet," Hitoshi suggests, smirking in 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬's direction. "If I remember correctly, a Pomeranian will treat us to lunch." After all, the deal was the one that got the least amount of prizes would pay for everyone's lunch. He glances at the bags filled with plushies and is reminded that the loser of the claw machine challenge needs to treat everyone to lunch. It was too bad for 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬. Hitoshi won by a large margin since he got 7 plushies while 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 got 4. Funnily enough, they each allowed him to keep 1 plushie for himself. Of course, he picked the white bunny plushie Hitoshi won, and a black bunny plushie 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 didn't like too much. It's silly, but the 2 plushies remind him of the 2 special people. "We love rabbits," a feminine voice echoed in his mind. "I like them because they're cute, but my husband likes them because rabbits remind him of me." "When you escape, you can call yourself Rabbit if you want to do vigilante work," a kind, male voice in his mind told him. "I prefer if you do legal hero work, but I won't judge." They were really good people who didn't have to risk their lives for someone like him. Whatever they saw in him must be something beyond his comprehension. Or maybe they were genuinely good people. He's starting to learn that those people exist in the world, and those 2 were not the exception. "Earth to Izu," Hitoshi calls out, bringing Izuku's mind back to reality. "Did you hear what I said?" "Sorry," Izuku apologizes sheepishly. "My mind drifted off, so I wasn't paying attention. What did you say again?" "Do you want to break the Pomeranian's budget by going to a Western-style buffet or a more traditional buffet?" Hitoshi asks, dismissing the look 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 is giving him. "What's the difference?" Izuku wonders aloud. His stomach began to growl, and he realized how hungry he was. He can about to eat almost anything at this point. "One-serve food typically served in European countries," Hitoshi explains. "Traditional buffet serves food we usually see here. Both buffets are at fixed prices. What to choose?" He wanted to try new things, so the Western-style buffet seemed an interesting place. Plus, he was curious about what types of food other countries tend to eat. "A Western-style buffet," Izuku happily responds. He then turns to face 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬. "I know you lost the best, but thank you for paying." "No problem," 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 grumbles. "At least someone appreciates me." Hitoshi flips 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 off, which earns the insomniac some verbal threats from the blonde. Hitoshi, as usual, didn't care. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 gritted his teeth at the sight of Yagi, of all fucking people, acting all nice and chummy to Izuku. Did the oaf completely forget how his false accusation had nearly ruined his parents' lives? Because of the hero, he spent 2 years in shitty foster care, being raised by the people responsible for pinning a crime they committed on his mother and father. Memories of the foster parents' abusive words being hurled at him resurfaced, and it took everything in him to shout at the memory. It would be pointless, useless, if he were to scream at the world for something that occurred in the past. Besides, he has to show Japan's #1 idiot that he wasn't the stupid kid he was years ago. "This is 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 and Hitoshi," Izuku introduced, his tone bright but words cautious. "They are my best friends." Seeing how Yagi became uncomfortable at Izuku's comment almost tempted to say something to add salt to the wound. However, he held his tongue despite hating Yagi and Yagi's wife for everything they had done. Like it or not, Yagi is Izuku's mentor and plans to give Izuku a ridiculously powerful quirk. He's not about to fuck this opportunity up for the greenette, just because he hated the #1 hero with every fiber of his being. He will hate them in silence because, believe it or not, he doesn't curse at everything. People tend to forget that sometimes, which is fine with him. Let them underestimate think so he can prove them wrong. "You never told me about your friends," Yagi responds, his voice unsure. "Oh, look," Yagi is avoiding eye contact with him and is solely focused on Izuku. How heroic. If someone is guilty of something they have done, they should at least have the balls to look straight in the eyes and acknowledge the other fucking presence. It's cowardly to not look at the person whose life you turned upside down. Oh, Izuku said, his smile faltering. You never ask about friends, so I thought you wouldn't care too much about them. Great fucking job. The nerd is all sad now. Doesn't the hero know about Izuku's non-existent self-esteem, or how he takes any comment that has the implication of being negative? Don't blame yourself, Izu, Katsuki interrupts, getting into Yagi's line of sight. You have a lot of things in that brain of yours. What's even more frustrating about the situation is how Yagi has the nerve to mentor someone like Izuku after the irreversible damage he had done to his life. Not even after his parents were proven innocent. Yagi never apologized to his damn face and sent a stupid letter. Yagi better watch his fucking back, because if the bastard does anything to fuck Izuku up emotionally or mentally, nothing is stopping him from attacking the hero. The nerd has gone through enough already, and Katsuki is not about to let some idiot undo all of Izuku's progress. Yagi wisely took a step back, not wanting to provoke the blonde. Sensing Katsuki's hostility toward Yagi, Hitoshi cuts into the conversation. Izu, 𝐬𝐴 still owes us a trip to the buffet you wanted to go to. Oh, yeah, Izuku said, his eyes lightening up. He turned to face Katsuki, which slightly improved the blonde's mood. Katsuki, you said you made a reservation. What time was it for again? Soon, Katsuki said, eyes shifting between Izuku and Yagi. We better fucking go if we want to get there in time. Not wanting to raise suspicion about his intentions, he immediately stomped forward as he shouted for the other two to hurry the fuck up. It took a few seconds for 𝗫𝐸 and Izu to sprint as they decided to race against each other. They must have thought he would be joining because they didn't look back to see if he was following them. Don't you dare hurt a single hair on his head, Katsuki threatened once they were alone on the sidewalk. Fuck up, and I will find you. No matter where you hide, I will find and make you wish you had never met Izu. I'm not going to hurt Izu, Yagi promised, trying to not provoke the blonde's anger. I would never hurt Izu. I don't fucking believe you, Katsuki abruptly states, giving the man an icy glare. Did you forget? You promise you will never hurt, but look where it leads us. A guilty look passed across Yagi's face, but it didn't make Katsuki feel better this time. Don't repeat the same fucking mistakes with Izu, Katsuki said before walking forward. Because if you do, there might be no one to figure shit out like 𝐲𝐴's old man. Katsuki didn't need to look back to know the guilt was eating the hero up. Good, let Yagi be reminded of the guilt so history won't repeat itself with Izuku. Izuku lay sprawled on the sand, noticing Aizawa patiently waiting at the corner of his eye. He could also see Katsuki glaring at Yagi because today, out of all days, Katsuki wanted to see if Yagi was not doing what he described as irreversible damage. You got your ass beaten again, nerd, Katsuki calls out, opening a water bottle. This is the 5th time you got your ass kicked by 𝐲𝐴. It could be his mind playing tricks, but he swears he hears Yagi quietly asking himself why Katsuki still calls his stepson by his first name. Izuku wants to know, too, because he sees Katsuki insulting everyone who isn't his friends or family. He will never admit it out loud, but seeing all the creative names Katsuki has for Yagi was slightly funny. Would you like a spar, Katsuki? 𝐲𝐴 calls out, flashing a manic grin. Akutane could use a break. No, Katsuki responds, immediately suspicious of the man. I don't trust you to not throw me in the fucking water. One day, he will figure out how Katsuki and Aizawa know each other to the point they could banter like this. For now, he will continue trying to figure out the purpose of the training. Quickly getting up, he dusts the sand off his clothes and spits the sand in his mouth. He will definitely need a shower, considering how much sand he's getting on his clothes and hair. Did you figure out the purpose of today's training? Aizawa asks, watching the teen's movement. Not yet, Izuku admits, pausing to think if he's missing something. You said there is a reason, but I'm unsure. We'll spar one more time, Aizawa informed the teen as if he was expecting this response. Afterwards, I will explain the purpose of today's training. Izuku took one foot forward before sprinting toward the man. When he sees a leg swing toward him, he drops to the floor and rolls to the side. He barely avoided a kick to the waist. Ever since Aizawa tested his current capabilities on their first training day, the underground hero has not been holding back. It makes him wonder how he was able to catch the man off guard that rainy night. Catching a glimpse of another hit, Izuku jumps off the ground and stumbles backward. Inching away, He sees a hand reaching to grab something. Suddenly, he's back in the cold, dreadful place, and his mind will only see a big, menacing hand reaching to squeeze the top of his head. Fear temporarily overtakes him, and he remains still. The lapse of focus nearly causes him to almost trip on something behind him, returning him to the present. Whatever it was something he had to deal with another time. Izuku blinked to reorientate himself and leaped to the side when a foot tried to slam onto the ground. How? Izuku mutters to himself as he ducks one of Aizawa's attacks. Every time he predicts the Underground's hero attack, he is proven wrong and left to scramble a way out of getting his ass kicked. The man is extremely agile and can maneuver through anything. Izuku would run and use his short stature to move between the remaining hunk of trash on the beach. His plan to ambush Aizawa with a surprise attack was foiled when he realized Aizawa managed to follow him. He dodged left and right, trying to figure out what martial arts Aizawa used. The Underground hero's attacks would differ in each round, including this one. Izuku had only been forcibly trained in stealth and the world's deadliest martial arts. However, Aizawa uses various techniques, some of which Izuku had never seen others use. It makes it impossible to suspect the next hit, making him have mixed emotions. He's excited because he will be learning these techniques soon. He's angry at himself because he realizes how much he has to learn and hone his skills if he is ever to end the legacy of evil. There is a bucket full of guilt for all the things he had done to Aizawa, and the Underground hero will never know he's training the person who left him nearly dead. Tired, Aizawa spoke, landing a kick to the waist. Falling to the ground, Izuku had seconds to do a barrel roll to avoid having the spar end. As long he's still up, this spar continues. After a few rolls, he stops to crouch to watch Aizawa's movement. He leaps several feet away when he sees a hit heading his way. The teacher must be bored because he's now standing, waiting for Izuku to make his next move. Izuku would have taken offense to that, but then realized Aizawa had been attacking him in a steady stream of kicks, punches, and hits. Hoping to land a hit, Izuku sprinted forward and swung his fists at the weak points. "Have you been watching clips of Toshinori's fights?" Aizawa asks, easily dodging Izuku's punches. "How did you know?" Izuku said in between breaths. Izuku continues to throw punches, trying to replicate what he has seen All Might do in his fights. It's how All Might use one for all, so he needs to learn to do the same if he wants to utilize the quirk fully. However, no matter how fast or where he throws his fist, Aizawa would successfully dodge the attack or block occasionally. It always comes as a shock when Izuku feels his fist caught in Aizawa's hand, making him quickly pull back his arm before the man's hold tightens. "You could do better, Izu," Katsuki yells. "Is 𝐲𝐴 going to kick your ass again?" "Maybe. But Izuku will try his best not to get beaten for the 6th time. What if he tries to charge at 𝐲𝐴 and lift him off the ground? He hasn't tried that yet, and it has worked in the past before his freedom." He momentarily looked at the ground, realizing Aizawa never said he couldn't use the sand to his advantage, only that he couldn't use the equipment. That's why Aizawa spars with him without his captured scarf. Izuku repeatedly kicks the ground, creating a small cloud of smoke. Then, on what he viewed as an unfair move, he pulled his leg back and did the biggest kick he could do to make some sand and dust form where Aizawa was, while he purposely made sure he didn't kick sand into the teacher's eyes. It was enough to make the Underground hero shield his eyes. Not wanting to waste the opportunity, he ran on his tiptoes. He reached his arms to grab Aizawa, preparing to lift him off the ground. "Nice trick," Aizawa comments, meandering out of the way, and now he's behind the teen. "But try something less predictable next time." Suddenly, Izuku felt something on his shoulders, and he flipped onto his back. He sees Aizawa staring at him, offering a hand to help him get up. He reached his arm out to grab the hand, and he was pulled up from the ground. "I thought I got you this time," Izuku admits, and he can hear Katsuki laughing at him. Just for that, Izuku walked toward Katsuki and swiped the last of Katsuki's favorite trail mix bran. Then, before Katsuki could take it back, he shoved the entire content into his mouth. He doesn't care if he looks like a chipmunk. "I wasn't hungry anyways," Katsuki mutters, and Izuku considers it a win. He munches on his snacks as he waits for Aizawa to reveal why they had spent the past hour sparing, when they should have been working on helping him receive one for all. "You are fighting like Toshinori," Aizawa starts, as Izuku looks puzzled at the man. "You're not him, so you need to stop fighting like him." Does he mean he needs to stop throwing punches like Yagi? Why? It's how Yagi used the quirk for his entire hero career. Do they think he can never replicate Yagi's techniques? Was this another way to tell him he'll never be as good as Yagi? Something flicked his forehead, and Izuku saw it was Katsuki. The blonde gave him an unimpressed look, and Izuku wondered since Katsuki had gotten up from his seat. Oh, he must be muttering. And somehow, Katsuki always has the ability when he lets his mind wander too much. Why? Izuku asks, looking between Yagi and Aizawa. Isn't that how it's supposed to be used? No, Yagi answers before Aizawa can speak. The teacher gave the hero a look. I apologize, my boy. I should have been clearer when we started training. The quirk will become yours to use however you see fit. This is why I wanted to train your successor. You struggled to get some point across, Aizawa mentions to the man before turning his attention back to the teen. Akatani, Toshinori, and my siblings have told me about your fight. And, Izuku hesitantly responds. He has no idea where this is heading. Is Aizawa talking about the fight between him and the songwriter? What does that fight have to do with training for All for One? He's lost and wants Aizawa to get straight to the point. You're quick on feet, and your fighting style utilized more of your legs, 𝐲𝗏 disclosed. However, I have rarely seen you utilize the same techniques Toshinori had described to me. Oh, he hasn't realized he tends to use his legs for most of his tasks. Unfortunately, this makes sense since, because of his short stature and underweight, he has to learn how to attack quickly and relay more of his legs to sidesweep to take down his targets. Actually, he always has weapons, and without them, Izuku knows he wouldn't have killed a handful of targets he was ordered to do. I thought I should be like Yagi, Izuku admits, and he could feel his cheeks reddening. He doesn't know it was so embarrassing to admit to that. When he heard Katsuki laughing at him again, he was 1 second away from pushing him to the sand, but Aizawa spoke. When receiving the quirk, you must treat it like an extension of your body, Aizawa explains. It's not a power-up to make your punches hit harder and faster. No two people are the same, so it's illogical to expect you to utilize the same techniques as Toshinori. Oh, this is what he meant. That makes sense. He has been solely focusing on improving his punches and copying Yagi. Does that mean when he gets the quirk, he can channel the quirk throughout his body, like his legs? That would be great because most of his fighting styles involve kicks and dodging until he improves his punches. So I need to use my kicks and dodging skills, Izuku states, pondering what Aizawa had told him. And it's not bad if I don't do the same thing as Yagi. Of course not, Yagi cuts in. Akatani, I offer you one for all because I knew you had the heart of a hero. I never expect you to become a copy of me. That's good, Izuku sighs. So I need to remember to incorporate my kicks and get permission to carry weapons. We'll help you train on your punches, Yagi continues as he almost went to ruffle the teen's hair. Katsuki nearly growled at the hero, so he didn't. It's good to develop more skills to alternate depending on the situation. Now, if Toshinori wasn't too much of a coward to ask for someone to provide better training to prepare Akatani's body for the quirk, that would be great, Aizawa states as Yagi coughs up blood. Izuku blinked, unsure why Yagi became so pale of a sudden. Whoever this person Aizawa was referring to must be someone Yagi is terrified of. Well, that's another question for another day. Izuku sprinted across the streets alongside Hitoshi and Katsuki, asking himself how they got themselves in trouble so quickly after being granted permission to patrol. He could hear Katsuki taunting the police and Hitoshi holding back his laughter. Behind him, he hears several police officers attempting to chase them, shouting at them to stop and to come willingly. The key word is attempt. Glancing over his shoulder, he sees the officers chasing them, surrounded by the local stray population. Cats jump on them, tear off their clothing, and climb on their faces to block their line of vision. He doesn't know how Hitoshi befriended all the neighborhood strays to the point of having the cats listen to his every beck and call, but he's not complaining. Fuck the police, Katsuki shouts, flipping off the officers behind him. Why did they come after we finished crashing the smuggling ring? Because he did the work for them, Hitoshi guessed, dropping a small paper bag of cat treats as he ran. I thought you were smarter, 𝐬𝐴. Izuku wonders how his friends could joke and taunt each other while running for their lives. Katsuki's provocation toward the police and Hitoshi's cat army are not doing them any favors in maintaining the deals with their guardians. Didn't they forget their agreement if they were ungrounded from patrolling? They were just allowed to resume patrolling a lot earlier than expected because the adults felt like they learned their lesson the first time. We're ending your grounding early due to Takashi upgrading your gear much faster than we expected, Hikari's voice repeats in his mind. If you don't create another media frenzy on your patrol, we'll allow everyone to resume their original patrol hours. Unfortunately, Izuku thinks they are creating another frenzy, but hopefully, it won't be a crazy frenzy. Heroes up ahead, Katsuki yells, putting his hands in his pocket to grab the smoke bombs. We're going to have to split. Izuku wants to argue against that because Katsuki and Hitoshi don't have much experience outside of patrolling and stopping crime. But he sees several heroes ahead. Knowing the stir he accidentally causes online, he knows they will primarily target him. He will have most of the heroes after him, and, in the best scenario, one hero each for Katsuki and Hitoshi. Izuku sighs in resignation, knowing there isn't much of a choice. Looking between his friends, they nodded in agreement on what must be done. He slips his hands into his pockets, grabbing a fistful of smoke bombs. If they are going to do this, they need to create an opportunity to split up and buy time to make a reasonable distance between them. The distance between them and the heroes was getting shorter, so they only had seconds to act. Katsuki and Hitoshi began to sprint in opposite directions, each heading to a different alleyway. He hopes they memorize enough of the maps so they don't end up in a tight spot. Let's split, Izuku orders, loud enough for the heroes to hear. When the heroes' attention was on them, they all threw the smoke bombs on the ground. Activating his quirk, Lens, Izuku easily maneuvers around several heroes who are stuck around, pushing random heroes against each other to create confusion. A few stumble in the cloud of smoke, and others are telling the wrong person to stop pushing them. Izuku has to admit, it made him chuckle slightly. Once he ran through the cloud of smoke, he lifted his mask just enough so everyone could hear his singing. Taking a deep breath, he began to sing a song. Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who's the strongest of them all? Izuku stood in place, waiting for the heroes to emerge from the smoke cloud. When no one did, he sang even louder. The Jade Rabbit is the strongest of them all. Izuku pulls down his mask when he sees several heroes coming through the smoke. If he were a regular civilian, he would have loved to ask them questions about their quirks and motivation to become heroes. He ducked an extended wooden arm and gave a quick wave. Later, he'll research more about the heroes chasing him, like the one with the wooden body and the woman trying to subdue him with a cloud of purple smoke. Oh, and he wants to do research about the hero who has the strangest costume for a hero who has a costume entirely made out of denim. It's nice meeting everyone, Izuku calls out before dashing toward the streets. Izuku dodged left and right, avoiding wooden arms and a piece of denim clothing aiming for his ankles. Oh, it looks like they were trying just enough to apprehend and not hurt him. Okay, they really want him for his quirk because he knows this usually doesn't happen when heroes chase vigilantes. For several minutes, he ran and used his surroundings to his advantage. He knocked empty bins to the ground to distract and catch them off guard. If there was a signboard, he knocked those down too, because he knows heroes have to make reports when they damage property. While he doesn't know if a signboard counts, he might as well try. Too slow, Izuku hollered cheerfully. Catch me if you can. Spotting an alleyway, Izuku sprints into it. Expecting to be followed, he ran until he reached a dead end. He hears the heroes trailing behind him, telling him to stop and saying things about helping him if he just turns himself in. He paused for a second, hearing the genuineness in their words. While these heroes are true to their words and seem to care for people, Izuku will not let them catch him. Not only does he have unfinished business to do, but he refuses to become someone's pawn. He's happy where he is, and doesn't want to lose his happiness. Looking up, Izuku made his decisions. He climbs up the side of the building as quickly as he can and crouches at the side of the building. It didn't take the heroes to notice he was watching them. Kid, get down from there, the woman shouted at him. No, thank you, Izuku responds, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't feel like getting caught today. Looking between the heroes and the empty space on the roof, Izuku pretends to debate whether to run or stay put. Then, he bid the heroes farewell and run across the roof. He could hear someone shouting at him to get down, and a different person convincing him to turn himself in. Well, he doesn't feel like it. For several minutes, he ran and leaped across rooftops. The only sounds he could hear were the wind hitting his face and his footsteps. When he thought he had lost track of them, he stood at a random spot on the edge of a building and prepared to use his earpiece to ask his friend if they escaped unarmed. His hand reached inside his hood, so close to pressing the button on his earpiece. However, the back of his mind is screaming at him to move. He hears something, a rustle of fabric that a regular person would have missed. Years of training, and carrying out assignments had taught him to pick up noises. He doesn't hesitate to leap to the other building, as he hastily drops some smoke bombs behind him. Something brushes against his legs, almost wrapping around them. But Izuku pulls his knees close to his chest and does an impromptu barrel roll across the roof. Remembering someone behind him, he jumped up from the ground just in time to see a familiar figure dressed in all black land several feet away from him. Why oh why, out of all heroes, it has to be this hero. Eyes staring at familiar red eyes, Izuku subtly reached for his bow staff. He didn't know if he would have to fight his way out, or if he could come up with a convincing argument for the hero to let him go. Unlike back at the beach, he had his tools and could fight to his capabilities against the underground hero. It was just like the hero said. He didn't have to limit himself and use the fighting style he was most comfortable with. "I didn't expect to see you out patrolling tonight," Izuku states, stepping back. "Eraserhead, was it? I didn't know you spend your time chasing people across rooftops." Aizawa took a calculated forward, making Izuku slightly nervous. He should have known he would run into someone he knows by now. Luckily, the man doesn't seem to recognize him, putting him at an advantage. Still, he would prefer anyone else, even in 𝗏𝗏, than the underground hero. "We need to talk, Rabbit," Aizawa said, picking up the teen's nervousness. "No, we don't," Izuku responds as he shook his head. History was almost repeating itself. But unlike their first interaction, Aizawa knew he was a teen and gave him such a worried expression. Why are the gloomy, dead tired ones always worried for him?